Thanks to everyone for being here this evening. We will go ahead and call to order the East Consolidated Zoning Board special meeting. Can we go ahead and do roll call for quorum?
Yes, Chairman. Dan Foyle.
Present.
Kelly Rast.
Present.
Fred Wingert.
Present.
Rod Richardson.
Present.
And Glenn Klingensmith.
Present.
Thank you, sir.
Would you mind doing the statement for the hybrid meeting?
Yes, Chairman. This meeting is now being recorded in the board hearing room with zoning board members attending in person as well as on Zoom. There's an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. For Zoom participants wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app at the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. Comments will be received from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. When it is your turn to speak, the moderator will recognize you by the name or phone number used to join the Zoom webinar, and your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and the city and state where you reside for the record, followed by your comments. All public speakers will be limited to 3 minutes unless the chair designates a different time period in order to accommodate all the speakers. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-9666. Board members, staff, and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking. Please speak into the microphone so that people attending via Zoom can hear you and the comments can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and, since this is a special meeting, we only have one item on the agenda, so there's no need to add, delete, or revise the agenda. Can I get an approval or a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Kelly Ross, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any disclosure of conflicts of interest? Hearing none, are there any disclosures of external contacts or discussions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and present the first application before us this evening. It's application number E23-348 PPAU, the preliminary plat for 20305 Metcalf, as well as application number E23349 CUP. It's a conditional use permit for the same address. And we can go ahead and have staff's report, please.
Good evening, Michelle Leiniger, County Planning staff. These applications are again for a preliminary plat and a conditional use permit for Metcalf Soccer Complex. This is a vicinity map. Vicinity map showing the location of the parcel outlined in blue, which is located on the east side of Metcalf between 199th and 207th Street. The intent for the plat is for 4 lots, with lot 1 proposed as an indoor and outdoor soccer complex. This is an aerial of the property which shows the existing farmstead in the northwest corner and then the surrounding uses. Here's the existing zoning of the area. The property is currently zoned PEC 3, which is an industrial district. The zoning is not proposed to change and has been zoned industrial since before our regulations in 1982. Permitted uses in this district include warehouse, manufacturing, assembly, and research facilities. Properties to the north are zoned commercial and residential and developed as such. Property to the west is zoned rural and used for crop agriculture. Property to the south is zoned industrial and developed with a industrial park. And then the property to the east is railroad tracks, and then east of that is a county park. The property is within the planning area of the Stillwell Community Plan, where the future land use is identified as future office research and development. While the soccer complex proposed on lot 1 is not consistent with the office research and development land use, the private recreational use is not mentioned or contemplated in the plan. The impact of the proposed athletic complex with outdoor fields and indoor facilities is less intense use than what is permitted by right in the industrial district and what the future land use is designated for. With these things taken into consideration, the use is keeping with the comprehensive plan. This is the proposed preliminary plat. I've outlined the lots for you in colors because it's real busy. Lot 1 is in red. That is the proposed soccer complex where the CUP would be located. And then lot 2 is where the existing farmstead is located. And then lots 3 and 4 are vacant. The purple tract A is the stormwater detention facility for the entire site. Plat meets all the minimum infrastructure requirements and subdivision requirements with the exception of driveway spacing, which I'll talk about. These are 2 plat exceptions requested with this plat. They're both related to driveways. The first one is the spacing of the proposed driveways. Kind of see with more clarity zoomed in on this slide, the spacing and what is required. The standard is 1 driveway per 1320 linear feet of frontage. Property has 1644 overall frontage. 2 accesses are required for the International Fire Code requirements for the proposed use. That allows for, if one access is blocked, fire and medical can get into the site from another access. The other lots will also access these 2 drives when developed and will not be able to have direct access onto Metcalf. This is the second plat exception. This one is more temporary in nature. There is an existing driveway on the site to the farmstead. That's on proposed lot 2. Again, the standard is 1320 of linear frontage per driveway. The request is for that driveway to remain. So the users of the site have access to the house. The proposal would be that when the property is redeveloped, that driveway goes away and then access from that adjacent access drive would support that lot. Staff does support both of these plat exceptions. Onto this CUP. This is the proposed CUP area for the soccer complex, which is lot 1, and then tract A for the stormwater. The property has existing PEC 3 zoning, and the proposed use for the athletic facilities is permitted in the district with a conditional use permit. Under the current zoning, the property could be developed with more intense industrial types of uses than the soccer complex, as it is laid out, is consistent with the zoning of the nearby properties as stipulated. Here's a zoomed in area of some of the details of the site. This is the south portion where all the activity occurs. The proposal includes a large building, which is outlined in blue, with the green boxes inside. Those are the inside fields. And then the 4 outdoor fields are outlined in green. There's a warm-up area on the east side of the building, associated parking around the building, a playground, a restroom, and utility building shown in purple, and site lighting. The outdoor fields are proposed to be used for practices only, and indoor fields will also be used for practices and games or tournaments on the weekends. No fixed seating is provided in the outdoor fields, and no public address system will be used. 276 parking spaces are shown in stormwater detention facilities. Again, for the entire site is proposed off this screen to the north and east. The applicant held 2 neighborhood meetings and has made significant changes to the plans based on these meetings by moving all of the activity to the southernmost portion of the site. Initially, the building and the fields were up against the north property line. Just to go through some of the details of the site, parking for the site is provided around the building. Regulations do not provide for parking requirements for this type of use. The applicant has proposed parking based on the comparison of other soccer facilities in the area compared to the proposed soccer complex, and their need of approximately 46 parking stalls per field, which is a total of 278 parking stalls. Well, it's a little more than that, but 278 parking stalls total have been provided. Staff has utilized the Institute of Traffic Engineer Parking Generation Manual for a parking reference for us. Based on this manual, for a peak period, parking demand per field is an average of 62.9 parking spaces per field. Excuse me. The applicant's proposed parking count is based solely on practices and not for the inclusion of using the indoor fields for games or tournaments. Therefore, staff recommends using the ITE parking manual calculation of 62.2 parking spaces per field for a total of 374 parking stalls required. Staff recommends that additional parking be added to the site to reach that, and which is an additional 96 parking stalls. The applicant did provide a traffic analysis for the proposed use. Public Works reviewed the traffic study along with their third-party consultant, and the analysis has been accepted, and the findings that no street improvements are required due to the site size and driveway spacing have been agreed to. Go on to some landscaping. This is the landscaping plan. Just to point out some things that may be a little hard to read in green. Across the top, it says existing hedgerow. And then on the east side says another existing hedgerow. There's landscaping and screening requirements for industrial uses or industrial districts adjacent to residential property. And the north property line has that existing hedgerow of trees. These are just some pictures of that existing tree line. Some of the trees are located on the subject property. Some of them are on the other property. So it's kind of on both sides. Noting that there are some spaces in the tree line, additional evergreens identified in that yellow blob are shown added to the screening. Additionally, the building is located over 500 feet from the north property line where the residential zoning is located. With existing and proposed trees, the large area between the uses, staff finds that this requirement is met. Parking lot trees are provided along with screening trees adjacent to the west property line. And there's also an existing tree line along the eastern property adjacent to the railroad tracks. So here's a picture of east property line where you can see that green manicured lawn on the right side of the picture. That's the Griffin Industrial Park. So that's about the property line. This tree line is very much more dense than the one to the north. What you can't see here is that there was actually a train going by. So that's pretty thick. A chain link fence is also proposed along this property for added security. Try to keep people away from that tracks. Here is a picture of the property line to the south adjacent to the industrial use. There's minimal trees and fencing along this property. There's no requirement to provide screening between industrial zoning districts, but the applicant is proposing a fence along this property line. These are proposed elevations of the building. The regulations provide for design standards for buildings in the planned employment district. The proposed building meets these standards and include the use of stucco, vertical and horizontal siding, wood window brackets with a gray color palette. This is portion of the photometric plan, specifically just the building portion of it. The yellow dots are the lights that are proposed on the building. These are to help for security, to light the entranceways and then provide minimal light to the adjacent parking. The proposed lights are downward directional and proposed to be mounted at 18 feet. Here is the field lighting plan with the pole location shown in blue. The poles are proposed to be 70 feet tall and the lights are proposed to be mounted, excuse me, at 70 and 45 feet to light the field and the parking areas. These lights are also proposed to be downward directional, and the closest light pole is located over 1,000 feet from the north property line. The regulations provide for performance standards for the planned employment districts that illuminations at the public street and residential properties shall not exceed 1 foot candle and 0.4 foot candles respectively, and that the fixtures shall be downward directional. The proposed lighting meets these standards with the lighting illumination reading at the property line being 0 on the north property line. Staff is recommending stipulation that the field lights only be on when activity is on site and not after 10 p.m. Staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat, including the 2 plat exceptions, and subject to stipulations. And staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit for Metcalf Soccer, subject to the stipulations. If the specific stipulations are listed on page 19 of the staff report, they include a 10-year time frame, hours of operation, condition to add the additional parking, and that the tournament and games only occur in the indoor fields. There's some other details, but those are the big ones. We also did receive comments in addition to those provided in the packet. That those were provided for you on the dais. There's a whole bunch of other comments, and they're are generally in favor of the project. Here are 2 suggested motions to use if you see fit. Please note that there are 2 motions, one for the preliminary plat and one for the conditional use permit that should be acted on separately. And I can answer any questions. The applicant is also here to make a presentation and answer any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. I know that this, what you're presenting is probably about the 4th or 5th iteration and working with the applicant. So I appreciate what you've done and what the work of staff in getting us to this point on this. Is there any questions of staff?
The Kelly Ross, I just have one comment possibly. When we get these comments in, whether for or against, can we make sure an address is associated with the name, especially for something like this, so that we know where the person lives that's submitting a comment?
We can try, yeah.
Because that's important to know where the input is coming from. Thank you.
Rod Richardson, question just on the, in your staff report, you indicated there were 10 70-foot poles, but I count 11.
I could have miscounted.
Okay, I think it's 11. And secondly, this might be for Mr. Ford, or if you can answer it, but we referenced the Blue Valley plan, the Stillwell plan, and the comprehensive plan for rural area. Obviously those are recommendations, suggestions, etc., but they're plans, adopted plans. I do not understand exactly what the legal implication is of the Stillwell plan. Is it comparable? Has it been adopted in some way that we should give that particular consideration, or where does it fit in with the overall comprehensive plan?
I can address.
And neither do I. And I think obviously there in the discussion we're going to have, there's some fairly significant differences between what the Stillwell plan would suggest versus what the regs may allow and what staff's recommending. So I'm just trying to figure out where that is. Okay.
Yes, Mr.
Neither
Richardson.
do I, so.
Mr. Jay Leipzig, Michelle should be
Yeah,
able
go
to answer
ahead,
that
Jay.
question for you.
Okay, that's me. The comprehensive plan is a policy guide, and the Blue Valley Plan and the Stillwell Community Plan are adopted and incorporated by reference into those plans. So they hold as much weight as the comprehensive plans. Those go through Planning Commission review and recommendation with final adoption at the Board of Zoning Appeals. So they are a policy land use plan, and in theory, the zoning regulation should implement that plan. Oftentimes they get a little disconnected, and but the comprehensive plan and the Stillwell community plan hold the same weight. It's just a little more specific to a specific area, so it's not quite so broad.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly Ross, is there any way you can go in just for further education and detail with the traffic study of what they looked at? Like, did they look at the four-way stop? Did they look at the fact that maybe there might be 200 people coming in all at the same time? Did they look at future growth? Like, basically, are we not going to allow any more growth because this has swallowed up the entire traffic, potential? You touched on the traffic study, but can we go into a little bit more detail?
I can go into a little more detail. I know the traffic studies are done based on industry standards for the traffic models. Not only does the
What does that mean?
ITE manual, the international, what did I say? It was International Institute of Traffic Engineers. They also have a trip generation manual, and they plug those and other details of the surrounding area into software, and it provides information. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Those would be questions for the applicant. That is their traffic study. It's been accepted by our public works staff and their on-call traffic consultant, and they have accepted that that's based on true activity and such, but the details are questions for the applicant.
Would it be possible, Kelly Ross, would it be possible to get copies of a traffic study just to,
Sure.
so that we can kind of see what they're doing?
Sure.
And have you ever known a traffic study to come back and deny something? Just out of curiosity.
They don't approve or deny.
Oh.
What the traffic study does is it takes into consideration existing conditions and the impact of the proposed use, and it will tell you what improvements, if necessary, need to be made to the surrounding streets. So if the traffic study found that they needed a turn lane, or they needed to widen the street to four lanes, it would say that in the recommendations. It's not a approve or deny. It's just an impact to what the existing is.
Okay. Kelly Ross again. So do they actually take in consideration, okay, if there's this amount of games or there's tournaments, and so one team might win, so they're going to go on, so they're going to stay, more people are going to come, everybody's going to leave possibly at the same time at the end. Do they actually take in functionality of the area, the application, what's going to be going on, and
growth? The trip generations are based on industry standards for specific uses. So it's more of a general. I don't know any more details than that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not a traffic engineer.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Ross, I could try to also add a little bit more of that information. As Michelle noted, the traffic impact study definitely does go into the detail. For the scope of the study will look at everything, and it starts with really the number of fields. So there's a standard trip generation you would probably expect for how many fields, how many trips. In addition, it did look at, I think, the types of level of competition. Are we talking about just practices or games or a combination of both? It did that. I could tell you that with the initial submittal for this application, we've been working on this for a few months now. The initial submittal that the applicant provided for, which had more fields, did warrant improvements to Metcalf. So it required some turn lanes and some other improvements. With the changes that they made after meeting with the neighbors and coming back with another version of plan, the new scope of the traffic study with fewer fields generated fewer trips. Therefore, it did change the warrants for improvements. That's why, as Michelle noted, a traffic study won't say whether or not it's you should approve or deny, but what it will say is whether additional improvements are warranted. In this case, the initial study did show that improvements were required because they were proposing, I think, up to 9 outdoor fields and 2 indoor. But with the changes down to 4 outdoor fields and 2 indoor, it did not trip the warrants for any improvements. So just as an example, that you can see the kind of the changes that it could provide just depending on the scope and size of the development.
Okay, thank you.
This is Ken Klingesmith. To continue on with that, is that study then done within sort of the frontage of the facility, or did it take into consideration the 4-way stop sign, 374 cars, 4-way stop sign, on and off traffic from the freeway?
That's a good question. I would want to defer to the applicant to answer that. There is a scope. They did look at the surrounding area. I don't know what the extent of the scope was.
Thank you.
Fred Winger, Michelle, you referred a few times that the use we're proposing tonight is less intense than other uses in the PEC 3. Could you expand on that a little bit? Like compared to what other uses would this be less intense?
So some other uses that could be in that zoning district, that's our third from the most heavy industrial district that we have. You can get anything from manufacturing to looking for my notes here. Manufacturing and warehousing, missing where I'm looking here.
So I was reading through before the meeting, I read through all the uses that are allowed in PEC 3, and agriculture services, soil preparation, crop services, building construction, special trade contractors, apparel and finished fabric, lumber and wood products, good wholesaling. And as I read through those, I guess, the only thing I saw that could be close to this intensity with traffic would be bus, taxi, and limousine dispatching center. But I don't know that I would classify that what we're talking about tonight is less intense. It would seem like it's quite a bit more intense than most of these other uses. If you compare it to if you go south on 207th, the complex that's over there that has several businesses that have been in front of us many times for different changes, that would consider to be considerably less intense than this. Any feedback on that? Or
yeah, for example, all of the area around New Century Air Center and all of those, that's all zone PEC 3. So you could copy paste to that. You're going to have employees with industrial uses, and you're going to have trucks, trailers, loading, unloading, outdoor activity. So that's where the intensity kind of lies. So that versus the soccer field, you're not going to have that every day, all day. You had one last question, and I
guess when we talk about less intensive versus more intensive, I guess we're talking about relative to the residents that live there, because this is surrounded by homes. When most residents are home, it's after 5 on Saturdays, on Sundays, on holidays. This is going to be heavily used in those times and less times. So I guess it depends on when we're talking about the intensive usage, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you could have pretty much any type of industrial use there. And they don't have time and day limits. They could be 24/7. You could have Amazon facility there if they felt that it was a good location for them. And with little control over time and what they're doing, because those are permitted uses in the district. With a conditional use permit, you have the opportunity to limit some of the things that are more impactful. Those industrial uses could also be right up against the residential. The district requires a 50-foot peripheral boundary, and that is it.
Fred Winger again, even an Amazon facility would have a couple shift changes. Where there may be peak, but the peak we're talking about here would be much more than an Amazon facility in terms of the trucks in and out. So, thank you.
Michelle, this is Ken Klingensmith. Going along the lines of the Planned Research and Development or Light Industrial Park District, the PEC3, as you look through section 4, none of those kind of criteria match. So it makes me believe that we're then looking at the conditional use or special use permits from Article 23.
Correct.
And those are listed out, the A, F, G, H, I. And as you look at those, only 3 really seem to apply to PEC 3 as a conditional use permit, and that would be H, I, and J. And then when you dig in deeper in Article 23 in those, it doesn't seem like a sports facility is something that we're allowed to do for a conditional use permit in the PEC 3. So it's trying to see how we get, how we're allowed to do a conditional use permit when it doesn't fit one of the groups that in that PCE reg.
If
If you're looking at your book there, it's
yeah, if you bear with me,
14-10.
I'm gonna go over to the desk.
I'm inside the zoning regs and it's gonna be the 1410. Article 14, page 10. And it's just references at the bottom that none of the 27 other items would say this is allowed except a conditional use permit. And that seems like it's only referenced then where it says those conditional use permits in those groups. And those
Yeah.
groups don't seem like that allows it either.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Penley, planning staff. So I think the group that it would fall under would be Group A, which isn't specifically listed for industrial districts. What it is Group A allows conditional use permits in all districts, and that would include in any zoning district other than I believe it's the PEC 1 or a planned adult entertainment district. So in any district, a athletic complex could be permitted. This is an athletic complex. And so this is similar to like where we have an athletic complex in an RUR district, same thing. It could be in any district. So it's not listed under the category specifically for PEC 3, that because it's any district really.
Okay, so it's falling under Group A,
Group
item
A.
number 3.
Correct.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Michelle, could we go over the lighting again, if you could, please?
Sure.
The field lighting, what, can you just elaborate on that? What the criteria or what the heights and such were? I didn't see that, or if I missed it in the staff report.
Yeah, it's in the staff report. And it's on the plan set. There are 10 or 11 poles. The poles are proposed to be 70 feet tall. And then there's lighting both at 70 feet and 45 feet. And the applicant can explain more of the details about why, because the sports lighting field is very specialty. And what the code says is that it calls it glare, and any glare shall not go over the property line. It's on page 18 where it talks about it. The standards talk about how the illumination is measured in foot candles, and there's certain illumination readings at property lines adjacent to residential zoning and uses, and then adjacent to all other districts and the streets. It says illuminations in the public street and residential property shall not exceed 1 foot candle and 0.4 foot candles respectively. So the public street cannot exceed 1 foot candle at the property line adjacent to the street. and 0.4 foot candles at residential property line. The residential property line to the north shows 0.
How does that compare to the lighting standards that we have outlined? It said the following guidelines should be used to review lighting in Stillwell. Review should be part of the development plan process or when there's a community concern or neighbor objection to the lighting. And that maximum height of outdoor lighting is 18 feet. And that's quite much shorter than 70 feet.
Right. And so we're talking about in rural and residential zoning districts, light fixtures shall be no higher than 18 feet.
Then the next one's the non-residential zoning district.
Right. If a building is within 40 feet of the property line, the lighting between the building and the property line is encouraged to be building mounted rather than freestanding light poles, which it is. Building mounted fixtures should be no higher than 18 feet. Freestanding poles should not exceed 12 feet for portions in parking areas which are located within 25 feet of property zoned for residential use. So it meets that. Maximum height of freestanding light poles located more than 25 feet from property zone for residential shall not exceed 18 feet. I mean, this is not a standard, it's a guideline. They have a specific reason as to why they are wanting poles that tall. It comes into play with the LED lighting. The taller that they get, the more concentrated down they can get. Otherwise, you have shorter poles, they have to shine out. So it helps with some of that. The applicant, I know, has some information on that, so they can better describe it. But we as staff felt that the proposal generally met these guidelines.
Can you touch, this is Ken Klingersmith again. Can you touch on the wastewater and sanitary use? It seems like there's going to be quite a few individuals that are going to be on the property at one time. What kind of septic system, and with the concession stand, will there be any type of holding tanks?
On the utility plans, it shows a holding tank for the main building and then a separate one for the restroom facilities. And those are commercial and industrial holding tanks are permitted through our environmental department division. They permit those often. They just have to meet their environmental code, and then they do re-inspections of those every year. So if they need to have those pumped out often, that's what they have to do, because there's no sanitary sewer lines.
Ken Klingersmith again. When you look at the parking stalls and spaces, the illustration you showed on the screen doesn't show the additional 96 spaces.
Correct.
Where are they proposing that?
That was
planning staff yet where that's going to be, or?
That was something that we had added after we had discussed with the applicant.
Yep.
So that was something new from their last revision. So they would have to show that. There's plenty of space to add it on. Some of the parking rows are single-sided, some are double-sided. That would be for them to propose as the stipulation.
That would come in as final plat, which.
No, that would just be, it would be a stipulation on the CUP, and then they would have to revise the CUP.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Penley, planning staff. I know the applicant does want to address that specific stipulation. As Michelle noted, we recommended a stipulation. Their plan didn't show that additional parking. We recommended it based on their latest version. They will also show a concept for how additional parking could be provided. So they'll show that.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Rod Richardson, just a couple. I noticed in the public comments, there was a reference, someone in the public meetings, one of the public meetings asked about a berm being constructed along the residential property line. The applicant said, yes, that's something we would look at. Do you know whether, and that the applicant can obviously address that, but have they had any discussion with you about potentially adding that to raise the height of the landscaping?
This is Michelle Leiniger. That's not something we had discussed.
So you don't have any input on that?
I'm
No.
not
Maybe
aware of
the
that
applicant
either.
will address
No.
that. And correct me if I'm in error here, but obviously we have 2 or 3 different comprehensive plans, if you will, that have been adopted. And we have all these regulations. We have a conditional use permit application. Are we not essentially looking at an application where the applicant comes in and says, look, this is what will work for me and my proposed site under this conditional use permit? And our job basically is to say, well, our plans, et cetera, our standards really don't fit what you want. So how can we adjust this to avoid or minimize the negative impact from that discrepancy on the surrounding owners? Or can it not be sufficiently addressed so that we have to choose to deny the application? In other words, my point being, these specific regulations of an 18-foot pole versus a 70-foot pole, we kind of serve as the balancing act there to decide what we think might work or not work, and what goes over the red line in our minds or not. Isn't that a fair statement of what we're trying to do here?
Sean Penley, planning staff. Yeah, certainly there's a good question about what lighting is considered acceptable. Typically in a PEC3 zoning district, we wouldn't establish maximum heights for poles. We have maximum illumination that's allowed. They meet that requirement. But you're right, it's a conditional use permit. It's something that if there's a question, if there's a discrepancy between a guideline and the Stillwell Community Plan and the regulations, certainly it's a conditional use permit. The board could recommend what they think is appropriate. If it's the proposed height of poles is a conflict, certainly could recommend a change to that. It is not listed in our regulations, though, that have a maximum height. So although the guidelines in the Stillwell Community Plan do call for these recommended policies that apply to this area, the Stillwell Community Plan, there's nothing in our regulations that have been adopted specifically to address the maximum pole height. So it's something that I think the zoning board can absolutely consider as part of their review of the conditional use permit.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe we
Yes.
hear from-
Yep. Any other questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? Hearing none, if we have a presentation from the applicant to provide a brief overview of the proposal.
This is right. Yes. Thank you. Chairman, good evening. Kurt Peterson here, 900 West 48th Place, Kansas City, Missouri, here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is the owner of the property, Cogent Enterprises LLC. The owner of the entity is actually Brandon and Sarah Bohr. Typically, they'd be here before you, eyeball to eyeball, but unfortunately, they both returned from vacation and tested positive with COVID. So they're not with us tonight. We very much appreciate staff's hard work on this application. This was, as one board member just mentioned, there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of work. Staff had to do a lot of work on this, as did our design team. And really, staff's work on that bore fruit in the staff report. It's very, very detailed, and I don't intend to go through and rehash everything that's in the staff report because I know you all read that carefully, and staff gave a fulsome presentation. But what I would like to do is focus on a few just important items that I think deserve a little bit more attention. Some of the questions that have been raised by neighbors to us and how we've answered them before standing for any of your questions. So I thought we'd start with the most basic of questions, which actually hasn't, and it's normal that it hasn't because the applicant is the one that would explain this, but why? Why soccer and why here on this piece of property? So Brandon and Sarah have children and they play soccer. And they found that over the years, they're traveling great distances just to go to soccer practice on turf fields, very large distances, even sometimes north of the river, believe it or not, with some of the new facilities. There really isn't a true local Southern Johnson County option. And so they began to consider this need and realized it's really not just a personal need. As they talked to friends in Stillwell, they realized it's a community need from their perspective, at least. And so they looked at possible properties in the area that could fulfill this need. So Brandon and Sarah are not developers to start. I don't know if that gives them a gold star in your book or it's neutral, but they're not. They're not developers. They're business-oriented individuals that have been entrepreneurs their whole life. From their winery to daycare facilities and other ventures. And really, most everything they've done has focused on a local need for their area. They're excited at this particular opportunity now for a soccer facility that will serve, by and large, Southern Johnson County and Miami County. So eventually the Vors did identify this particular property, the subject property here tonight. They saw that it was zoned for and adjacent to industrial uses, there to the south particularly, with the railroad to the east. They put the subject property under contract and hired an architect and an engineer to try to fit this soccer project on this site. So once they had a preliminary concept plan laid out, we called the first neighborhood meeting, which was August 23rd of this year. So we could go and sit down, as the neighbors will attest, to sit down and listen and see what the neighbors thought about the concept that we were presenting. Now, I want to pause. I can't always say this every night that I get the opportunity to talk about projects, but I mean this, that it was especially engaging. The tone, the substance, the questions were all really, really good from the neighbors. Now, I'm not at all, if anybody in the audience is wondering, suggesting that everybody gave everybody on the design team a high five. There were people that really liked the project, as they told us. There are other people that had some hard questions and had trouble with the vision. But I'll tell you, they were very substantive, good, two-hour meeting. After that first meeting in August, we took back as a design team everything that we heard. And as staff attested, and I know the neighbors will agree too, we substantially changed the layout of the project. So after that first meeting, we hit a pause. It took us about 2 months to do what I just described. And when we had kind of redesigned the project, met with staff to see if there were any red flags, issues, other adjustments, we met with the neighbors again on October 25th, again, about 2 months later, with the revised plan. So just a quick recap, because it's important to see where we've been. On the screen, you can see the current site plan, so not the original one. So quick contrast points for you. So the original plan showed the setback from the north. There we go. On the northern property line here, you have residential to the north. Here's the property line. The original setback from the northern property line to the building, this is that 2 indoor field building, was 134 feet. And the long side of the building, this way, was actually turned along this direction. So the revised plan that you see on the screen obviously is much different. It's a 523-foot setback and from the building to the north, and the building was turned so the short side of the building faces north towards the neighbors, again, based on feedback at that neighborhood meeting. Another difference is the 4 outdoor fields you can see down here at the very southern end of the property. The original plan showed those fields approximately 700 feet from that northern property line again. And the revised plan that you're looking at right now, if you could read that dimension there, real small, to the closest soccer field, closest edge of the outdoor soccer field is 995 feet, let alone obviously the 3 soccer fields that are even further away, tucked down by the industrial to the south. So there are just 3 other topics I want to hit besides that. Those are the major changes that came about from that first neighborhood meeting that we shared at the second meeting. But there are 3 other issues that I thought were worth digging into before just standing for questions, because we had a lot of discussion about these at those neighborhood meetings. The first deals with parking. So our plan, as you saw in the staff report, provides surface parking, 278 stalls. That is divided by the number of fields, 6 fields, 2 indoor, 4 outdoor. That's 46 stalls per field, as staff identified in her presentation. So we are confident, and I mean absolutely confident, that that is a sufficient number of parking stalls for what we're proposing. And the highest, when you think about, as you heard in the presentation, read in the staff report, the highest intensity of folks coming to the facility will not be on the weekend, because there's no outdoor field use on the weekend. And there's just 2 fields there on the weekend, right, that can have either games or practices. It's during the week because the indoor facility can be used during the week for practice, and the 4 outdoor fields can be used for practice. So just getting this very, very clear in your head, not racing through it. The most intense time for use would be Monday through Thursday. And it would be if all 6 of those fields were used for practice. That would require approximately 180 stalls, right? About 15 people per team. And you assume if you maxed out, that's about 15 per side of the field, right? You could put 15 people on each side of a soccer field, and that gives you 180 stalls. So as you do the math, the 278 stalls is just under 100 stalls more than that max out sort of situation. So there's ample capacity. That said, you heard in staff's presentation and read in the staff report, staff said, well, when we go to the ITE manual, it says, and this is national across all sorts of soccer facilities, it says it's suggesting more like 62 rather than 46 stalls per field. And they asked the VORs, the owner, to provide, that would be an additional 96 stalls to meet that ratio from the ITE manual. Now, a quick aside before we say we have a solution here. The aside is we truly believe that that's overkill because the ITE manual takes into account fields like Shields and Garmin and Swope Park that have there every weekend, right? Have massive tournaments with tons of spectators, people driving in from all over. I hope you've heard, and if you have any question about this, ask me again. We couldn't be any different than that for what the proposed use is here. However, I said that's a quick aside because the VORs said, sure, we want to work together just as they have tried to do where they can with the neighbors. This site plan you're looking at now, if you draw your attention to the red, the staff was exactly right in just a minute ago saying, hey, there's some areas where you could double load the drive aisle. In other words, add parking. So that adds up to another 96 stalls. What we would ask, though, is that those not be put in immediately. And we've done this on many projects. We'd ask officially at the end here, I'll ask for just one adjusted stipulation that deals with this. And we would say, since this is a CUP, if it's determined by the county that the parking is not working with what we've designed, that is minus the red, we will add the red, period. We don't think it'll be necessary, but if it is, we'll absolutely add it to meet staff's higher ratio. I said there were 3 topics. That was the first, parking. The second is traffic. So I'll tell you, we had some very thoughtful questions about traffic. I can tell that you're interested in traffic from the dais, right? Most of your questions dealt with traffic. So we wanted to take a chance to address really the most salient questions that were asked and the most frequent questions that were asked. So I thought I'd recap for your benefit, probably numbers about 3 or 4 main topics. Can you have more? Then we'll talk about more, but let's start with those. One is to highlight what was said, but it's extremely important. The third-party traffic study that was presented to the county was just that. It was a third-party traffic study. And as staff said, very important to Ms. Rask's question, it certainly does not say whether a project is good or bad. It simply says, look at the surrounding intersections, street network. If you do this, what would need to be done to, again, what traffic improvements would need to be done? It was already said tonight, but I want to say that again. That is what a traffic study does. And then the county, and in this case, the county's third-party expert reviews that and then provides to you and to us their analysis of the traffic study. And if they think the scope was wrong, or they think the analysis wrong, they think the counts were taken at the wrong time, I could keep going, right? We're very used to seeing a traffic consultant say that, and you'd be hearing that tonight. But tonight, as you've heard, that is not the case. The expert for the county said, we support the analysis, the approach, the methodology, and the conclusions, which is that no improvements were necessary. So overall, the peak hour for practices during the week, which the traffic study identified as 4:30 to 5:30, if all fields were utilized, all 6 fields were utilized for practice, would generate, it's at approximately 99, we'll round up for quick speak, 100 trips in and out. As you know, as most of you know, those of us that are around all the time projects, that is literally about, maybe not, you could have maybe senior living, right? Something that's, people don't even have cars. But in terms of just projects you can put on, 40, 50 acres, that's incredibly low for a peak hour to have 100 trips. Just to put some meat on the bones for that idea, you all know we have levels of service. That's how traffic engineers talk to one another and tell us whether it's a signalized or an unsignalized or uncontrolled intersection, whether people have to wait a long time, meaning there's a lot of traffic. The grading system goes from A to F. At the intersection, I should say, that means the most, I took this for granted, I should just say it for everybody, is certainly 199th and Metcalf. That's what the neighbors care most about. That's what we were watching for in the study. And at that intersection with this project, it would remain, including at peak, level of service B, which again, it's not like school where you're like, dang, I wish I got an A. A B is very, very high, as I know county staff would support. And so bottom line, again, from this traffic study that the county has approved, no Metcalf traffic improvements are warranted. Couple quick questions that were asked though. Will there be backups? If you picture with me, cars going southbound Metcalf. So they're at 199th, right? Crossing over, they're going south. The project is now on the left, right? As you're heading south. Will there be backups as people wait to go left so that it backs up and interferes with the access to 192nd Terrace? Did I get that right? You know, the first neighborhood entrance there to the north. Yeah, you guys know what I mean. So the traffic study actually shows that there would be at most during peak, again, we're going southbound trying to make a left in, there'd be a queue of 2 cars. And then you go, no, it can't be, right? Intuitively. I get it. I mean it. Let's think about it. Unpack it. And again, it's not coming from me, but here's the answer. One is it's important to see the idea of distribution. So when you look at the screen and you can see the 2 access points, northern access point and a southern access point, what the traffic engineer and the traffic study talked about is you automatically have 2 access points to enter, which helps people if they're going to the indoor facility and they're coming from the north, they're going to come in here. I mean, any normal person, at least after the first time, maybe they miss it the first time, but anybody that's a repeat player is going to come in here. And if you're going to the outdoor fields, you're going to go here. So one thing they emphasized was having 2 different access points matters for traffic. But the second is, and I found this as a non-traffic engineer, but around this all the time, the most intuitive. For there to be a backup, if I'm driving my car south and whether I want to turn left here or I want to turn left by the outdoor fields, the only reason I'm not freely making my left, the only reason a backup can be created, let alone a backup that would extend, you know, hundreds of feet to the north, would be if I can't make a left. And why can't I make a left? It's because a car is traveling from the south, not just a car, lots of cars, and aren't giving me a gap to, in a short period of time, make that turn. And what the traffic consultant said, traffic engineer said, is that there just isn't a lot of cars going south to north. It doesn't mean it's a ghost town, but to actually block traffic in any meaningful way, non-existent from a traffic engineering standpoint. They also assign a percentage of distribution. They said it's 10 to 15% of overall traffic, depending if it's the weekday peak or the weekend peak, is actually coming to and from the south. So that helps explain, again, unpack that idea that no, there's not going to be any backup to speak of trying to make that southbound left. Another question asked was, how will the 199th and Metcalf intersection be impacted by development projects in this area? We had an email exchange and a phone call with a neighbor over the last 72 hours that was very interested in that. It's a really good question. This is a lot of you guys have done this a long time. You know, it's a really good question. It's like, how does this fit in with the overall area? So the important first point, I think, for context before addressing the broader question is that what we just talked about is that the traffic engineers, both third party and third party county, say that this proposed soccer facility for the uses that would be approved under this CUP would not be a major trip generator of cars. I mean, far from it. And it's true that some proposed projects in the area, without maybe going into a bunch of projects tonight, but we all know there's projects hanging around that sure would, if approved and built, would introduce more cars that the county, as well as the city, but the county absolutely will take into account, just like we're required to do a traffic study. The county will look at that. But as I looked at some of those examples that neighbors brought up of projects we're reading about in the newspaper and things like that, I will say just anecdotally, I looked at them carefully. Back to not even needing to be a traffic engineer. When you look at the location and you think about where most of those people will be coming and going from and where the closest interchange is to the direction they want to go, the distribution would be by and large to the north to 179th and Metcalf, not somehow backtracking to go south to an interchange to then turn around and go north. In sum, I guess what I'm saying is we're confident the county will evaluate these other projects that are out there, but the minimal trip generation from this particular project that's before you tonight really does not warrant a delay of this project to just wait around and see what those other projects, how they turn out and what they do. Lastly, on traffic, I wanted to zoom out so we can see our blue site again here. There's 202nd Terrace that I was trying to refer to before, our first neighborhood entrance to the north. So one neighbor had a concern and raised a question about, will anybody choose to take this route around here or the other direction, either direction, and make this sort of cut through action to avoid going to 199th and Metcalf? So first to always maintain credibility. And I mean this, sure. Somebody could, right? Somebody might do that. I would suggest nobody would do that twice is the way I would say it. That is a circuitous route. It's a slower route. It's a longer route, and it's not saving them any time. But back to distribution, I keep using that word, traffic distribution. The other, I think, good point is when you look at the traffic study, it's back to right around that 10 to 15% distribution. This direction coming from the east and coming from the east-west and going from the west-east along 199th is a very, very small portion of the overall car trips that are predicted. And I think we all agree that's pretty intuitive. But again, water goes where water goes. You hear that, right? Water's going to flow where the easiest places. Somebody can make a mistake, but I don't think water's not going to flow along there. It's just not a path that makes any sense for a driver, even if they were trying to save time. And remember, the trip generation counts. There's not predicted to have any meaningful backup that would make somebody try to look for another route as well. Okay, I said 3 issues. We're on to the final one, which is lighting. So if anybody has been around Kansas City, certainly in development, certainly been around Stillwell, no one can be confused about Stillwell's position on lighting. I'm just going to say, right? Haven't been in a cave, not being tone deaf. From the very first time this project was proposed, we've got out the lighting regulations and looked at the, only use them when needed, light the area that's needed, no brighter than necessary, have full shields. And we went through all that, and the design team looked at all that. So first, that's not good enough. A good try isn't good enough, right? So I'm not stopping with that, but I want to tell you from the beginning, I witnessed it. That was extremely important to the team. So with lighting, I'm going to show an exhibit that briefly repeats what staff said for emphasis, because I know how important lighting is. And then I'm going to show you some images to end that goes even beyond what staff was able to show. So there's only 2 types of lighting in the entire project, only 2. The first is represented by the blue. The blue is outlining the building with the 2 indoor fields. And if you picture that building, you saw another slide that staff showed. I think there were yellow circles. I'm tracking, so you're seeing it. I'm showing you in a different way the same thing. So those yellow circles, or in this case, the blue outline of that building, are LED lights downward facing that are 18 feet on that building. And the first thing you might say is, wait, 18 feet, there you go again. That seems really tall. Staff nailed it. And you're going to hear in a second when I describe the other lights, the same thing. LED lights are amazing now. This technology did not exist. Certainly 20 years ago, not 15 years ago, started to come about 10 years ago, and they've refined it. It's incredible. They're spots. So the higher you go, the more you're able to spot downward and have no spillage kind of laterally to, in this case, to neighbors to the north or anybody else. And so the blue, what that represents is you see the parking on 3 sides of the building. There's parking on the west side, the east side, and the south side. There are no parking lot lights. None. They're not needed. And you saw the photometric analysis that shows that this provides sufficient lighting. Those 18-foot lights on the building that only face down, that are LED spots, are able to put lights for safety purposes along the base of the building and then light up those parking lots. That's the first type of light. The second type of light are the poles. The poles you can see indicated here in red, and there are 11. 11 poles is what you'll count. Those have 2 functions. The LED lights on the poles both light up the fields, which is obvious, but they also light up the magenta color there. So there are no parking lot, there are no drive lights in that area that you see there. That's the playground, by the way. You see right here, just for context. Right, if I can get my cursor. So there's no parking lot lights. Those are lit by these red poles. And again, why are they 70 feet tall? For the same principle we just talked about. If they're shorter, then they have to have some horizontal spillage, right? But when they're tall, they literally go boom, right down like spotlights, and are able to light up the field and that drive area. So I've had personal experience with these. They just keep getting better and better. This current generation of these LED lights, I imagine all of you have seen them in person, are incredible in terms of the way they have zero spillage. And I don't know if you've been to, I worked on a project at my alma mater, Beulah Valley North High School, and I went back and I helped because the community was concerned about putting in lights on that multi-purpose field that they put in about 5 or 6 years ago. And Musco, who we have one of the top lighting designers and specifically LED project implementers in the country. That is who the owners are using here. And they also did Blue Valley North and those lights. And even though that was 5 or 6 years ago and technology is even better, it's amazing what you've heard, what I've heard residents say later, which is you guys were right. There's no spillage at all. But rather than taking my word for it, we brought a couple of pictures. I remember at the neighborhood meeting, somebody even said, I've been to this project. This is obviously not doctored. This is real. You see how these LED lights on tall poles like we're using are able to literally light up the field and the apron intentionally around it, and there's no spillage beyond it. Another angle of the same thing. This is exactly what we'd be doing here. It does not have light pollution. It's because the technology's amazing. In terms of controlling these lights, kind of going back to the Stillwell lighting regulations, they will only be on. They're field by field. So there's a switch for every field, and there's timers, and there's also literally by the owner's app on their phone, they can control it. So when a field is not rented and not in use, the lights will be off. When they're in use, then they will be on. So concluding, we agree with staff's proposed stipulations, which number 1 through 17, except that we would ask that this board and staff consider modifying stipulation number 4. Stipulation number 4 is the one that would require those additional 96 parking stalls that we talked about just a few minutes ago. We would ask that it have language about deferring those 96 stalls, but that we would provide the plan that I showed on the screen officially to staff, which would go to Board of County Commissioners, and that we would put that in if the need was triggered as determined by the county. So for the following reasons, we'd ask for your positive recommendation of this application to the Board of County Commissioners. The VORs have identified, in our opinion, a true community need. Families are traveling from Stillwell and the surrounding area, and even Miami County are traveling a long way to practice on a turf soccer field. This land will not remain undeveloped forever. That's true. I know everybody agrees with that. And as compared to its approved industrial zoning, our opinion, some on the board in the audience may differ, but our opinion is most people would say this is a more desirable use than the range of various industrial uses that would otherwise be implemented on this site. The revised project preserves trees to the north. We haven't emphasized it a lot, but I can answer questions if you have them. Preserves all the trees along the north and a bunch of other trees on the site, and adds a 50-foot buffer, as staff pointed out, with specifically evergreens on 50 foot all along that northern property line. The indoor facility and outdoor fields have been located on the southern half of the site. As you saw, that was a big change that we were able to make, with great distances separating them, both the fields and the building, from the north. The traffic study and staff's finding that there are not traffic infrastructure issues. And then lastly, staff's favorable findings when it comes to the golden criteria, the subdivision regulations, et cetera. So we're proud to offer this to you. We hope that you would, just like the neighbors did, ask us as many questions as you have tonight, and we'll try to answer those. And then ultimately we'd ask for your support. Thank you for your time, Chairman, tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your presentation. Any questions of the applicant?
This Keller asked, so I think sometimes we need to talk about kind of relativity and perspective. I know I like how you frame things. You tend to frame things in an industry standards type of way. This is Stillwell. So we're not LA, but even though we can be lumped under industry standard, I think when we're talking about lighting, and I appreciate the work that's gone into the lighting with the focus downward, but I think the other aspect with lighting is if you drove by there today or you looked in that area at night, it would probably maybe have less than 5% light pollution when you look in that area. Would you agree with that?
Tell me, because I want to answer right. You're saying if I tonight drove out there, that's what you're talking about?
Well, yes. Yes.
I don't know percentages, but I totally agree that Stillwell
Okay.
has.
And
does have a lot of
then
light pollution.
when you drive by it as it's proposed or look in that area, even though the light's not venturing further out and is more focused, and I appreciate that aspect of it, you've increased the light pollution. I mean, probably, 25, 40 fold. And I think that's an aspect that needs to be brought into the equation of what that area looks like with the light pollution, not just the fact that it's straight downward. And as far as like on the building, you're lighting up a building. So now you have light pollution and you're making something stand out where people are used to it being dark. And I do appreciate the LED. We actually just redid all of our landscaping. We put in stone columns. We actually put LED lights on every single column. Our house was so bright, I took half of them out because it was even too bright for me, even though they were the focus. So I can appreciate what you're saying. It focused on the house, but literally our house looked like it was illuminated as soon as you turned into the cul-de-sac, and it was a little much for me. So there is that aspect of just lighting up the entire area, even though it's focused on that area. So I just want to make sure that, we're having these conversations, but we're not having parallel conversations.
I mean, that's why I totally agree with you. That's why I try to show pictures and not just do words. And I say, don't trust me, look at a picture. Absolutely. Sometimes I say it like this. This is a high level comment. You guys get it. But sometimes if you're talking to somebody that's not used to this, I say, hey, you can look up and you can see a point of light or whatever. You can see a light that is like a star, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not going to allow you to read your book in your living room, or
right. But I think you can agree.
It's not light pollution as that's defined. But if you don't like that, then you wouldn't like the project. That's why I put a picture up there. I totally agree with you.
And that's the point. I think we need to understand this is still light pollution.
Just like an industrial building would be let up, to be clear. But you're right. If you don't like this, if you like the field,
correct.
Better,
We're talking about this project.
More light than a field. I agree with
correct. So this is most people would look at this as a form of light pollution. So that I think I just wanted to bring that out to the table with the conversation. The second thing is with the traffic. And again, it's one of those things. I appreciate the industry standards. I appreciate the traffic thing, but again, it's relative to what people are used to. I personally find pulling on, and I have to pull out on Metcalf several times a day because my street comes on to Metcalf. It's actually harder because you have that inconsistent spacing, and so I find it really hard to believe it's not going to back up, because even on my street where there's less than 20 houses that actually exit that, we can back up on my street, 3 if someone just doesn't get the jump they have, or just happens to be consistent, because it's a big enough space, but just not that quite big. So you have your conservative drivers. So I'm really struggling with, and I'd love to see that traffic report to kind of get a better feel of how they figured that out, because I'm not sure how you figure that out, especially when you have kids driving. I'm hoping the teenagers are being conservative before they make a turn, which, could back up very quickly. And, I think that's almost one of those things that we have to be realistic and say, the proof will be in the pudding once it's being, once it's in reality. And that we just need to be honest about a few of these things and the perspective of it. I'm not talking about backing up all the way to 199th Street, but a 5-car backup, that's not what we're used to on Metcalf. So just wanted to put those out. So we're kind of talking on the same conversations.
I think you've framed up in this back and forth just a little bit, like really good contrasts that are real, that I'm not going to dispute. Everything you've said is about, if development doesn't happen here, people like it the way it is. And if that's the standard, then this project and every other project is going to go down in flames. We're trying to propose what we think, if something's going to develop, which it will develop, industrial or otherwise, we think this is responsible and good. But I agree with you. It's different. It's changed.
Yes. And Kelly Ratz, with all due respect, I think if my memory serves me, the last time we've had these CUPs up in that area, one of the positives have always been that it has very light traffic coming and going. And that's why we pass them. That's why we support them. And even staff always presents it in that way, that it has very light traffic. So everything around. So again, it's perspective, it's relative. I get what you're saying. It's always a balancing act with development. Love the fact that it's for kids and stuff, but it's a balancing act. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, this is Fred Winger. Could you put back up the map of the property, please?
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I attended the meeting back in August. I reached out to Jay, the director of planning, got his permission to attend. And at that meeting, you've described a few of the things that were discussed that night. At that time, the fields were further north, correct? Okay.
Exactly right.
Um,
The whole thing was shifted, including the fields.
so in that meeting, a couple of the individuals that attended brought up the fact that the Stillwell Park is to the south, right?
To the southeast, exactly. Yep.
And they brought up that it was designed for kids with special needs, sensory issues. That was part of the design of the park.
Yeah, all the new ones are. They're amazing.
Well, that park was brought up. Do you remember that discussion?
Right. No, I'm saying I agree. Just like Leewood and others that are doing these.
And we're not talking about, I'm talking about this park that was brought up for this park, right?
I said yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm saying it's a great thing. My mom works with special needs kids. It's incredible. I love it.
But the new design has actually moved the fields closer to that park, right? Considerably closer than they were in the first design.
For sure, right? Because the park is right here. and
Yeah, well, that's
fields
the
are
trail. That's
right
the
here.
trail right there for the park.
I'm saying in this direction right here. So I think, yeah, it's definitely closer. Just the playground here is closer too.
Okay.
Park.
Second question, in that meeting, there was a turning lane that you had proposed, correct?
We didn't propose it. It was required by the traffic study because at that time, all of this was shifted north and the traffic engineer said, look, there's not going to be distribution. People aren't going to go to the second entrance. They're all going to go to the first one. So that was what was required by the traffic study before we shifted everything to the south. And then they found now people will distribute between these two access points because of the way it's hard without the other one up here. Do you remember it was a totally shifted design? But that's why they dropped that requirement.
The traffic design study that I believe there was one there that night or it was discussed. What percentage of traffic will be coming from the north and what percentage of traffic will be coming from the south?
I think I'll look it up just to make sure I get the exact percentage right. But it's mostly from the north. The south distribution is on the weekend, it's 15%. This is peaks, right? We're talking about when I say weekend. And it's 30% on during the peak during the weekday. It says south on Metcalf Avenue.
30% from the south and 70% from the north.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, I'm very interested in what the folks here that may wish to speak have to say. And by that, I'm interested in two things. And I may have, more questions for you later in terms of your reaction to this and that. But having said that, I think there are a lot of people here probably would like to speak. And I'm just speaking for me, not the board, but I'm interested in a couple of things. Number one, when folks get up to speak, I know they will give their name and their address. I'm interested, number one, of whether or not you live within 1,000 feet of this property. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, soccer is a great thing. And I fully appreciate, I've read every single letter that's been sent in here. They're all basically positive, saying we need a place for our kids to play soccer. And the applicant's presenting a credible facility that would certainly address that need. And so I understand that probably anybody whose kids play soccer and have to fight for fields would support having a place to go. But I need to know as a board member whether you're within the confines of where the impact of this will be. So I'm going to accept that if you like soccer, you're going to love this, and that's fine. And you can say that. And as far as I'm concerned, sit down and great, and that's fine. I want to hear from any neighbors that are here as to what they perceive the impact, what changes they might wish to see, what they're particularly concerned about. That's what I am most interested in, because from what I have heard, the single greatest impact this facility could have is probably not traffic, probably not noise, probably not drainage, probably not really most anything else except the impact of lighting that may be employed on this site. This board has previously made it very clear to other applicants, as you well know, about lighting on other fields and a concern to have. And I remember, and it isn't new, it's a concern that goes clear back to when I was on this board, I think in 1991 or two, when the KCP&L or now Evergy facility was built. We made it very clear to them that we expected them to put up lights that would do what you're trying to do with your lights. And those weren't LEDs back then, they were others, but they managed to do it. And it's, you can see it, it lights what needs to be lit, but it doesn't light anymore. So they did a nice job with that. And I think it's stood the test of time. So now you're in their saddle and we get to see how you might approach that. So that's my first comment is I want to see, if you're supporting it, great. But I want to know if you're a neighbor and what your specific concern is. Number two, one thing we have to do up here is deal with facts. I'm personally not as interested in what, sort of fear of this or fear of that. I mean, we have experts that have provided us with a lot of facts. I think our job really is to try to figure out whether the applicant has balanced a use that can be authorized under conditional use permit in such a way that the areas where it doesn't meet the suggested plan, it can be moderated in such a way that we can live with it or not. And I don't know the answer to that question, and I won't even consider what I think about it till I've heard what everybody here has to say. I have formed no opinion one way or the other on that. But I'm very interested in that aspect of it. So questions for the applicant, number three. I asked Mr. Pendley whether there was any comment about the berm, and I didn't hear you comment on that. Is there? I'm neither pro nor con that. You said at the neighborhood meeting, or someone said that you would look at that in order to raise the landscaping to a higher level in the back on your 50-foot center trees. Obviously, there are a lot of berms around Johnson County that look really good and do a superb job of trying to screen things. What's your take on the berm?
Yeah, it was. I think it was raised at the second neighborhood meeting, and we did go back and talk about it. And just in terms of just like you balance everything out, we balanced it out with the fact of how all the improvements were far away, everything we talked about, all the landscaping, keeping the existing trees, the good tree line, the evergreens, and the fact that it's a balanced site and not a site that is sometimes when we put in berms, it's easy to implement because it's a site where there's a lot of dirt moving to be done. This is relatively speaking, it's got grade, but it's a relatively flat site. So that'd be pretty heroic for that sort of thing to bring in a berm all along there. So I'm being honest about weighing it all out, but not ashamed of that because we really do feel like for all the reasons we've talked about, this really, there's not going to be an aesthetic problem or a visual problem, but that's the answer to the question.
Okay. In that regard, then you're putting these evergreens, and it wasn't completely clear when I looked at your landscape plan exactly what kind of evergreens these were going to be.
It's preliminary. We haven't specified, but if you have, I'm a Green Giant fan, but if you have
whether it's Green Giant, Arborvitae, or whatever.
Right, that's right.
If you're not going to put the berm there, is it within the realm of possibility since a Green Giant, Arborvitae maybe have a spread at maturity of 10 feet maybe?
Or more, yeah.
Or 10 or 12?
Yeah.
If you're 50 feet apart, there's a lot of empty in between those. Would you give any consideration? And I'm just asking to making those closer than 50 foot on center.
Yeah, we could look at that and talk with staff. That's something we could look at.
Thank you for that. I noticed in the Stillwell plan, there were comments about the type of LEDs, and I think we're probably all familiar with LEDs. The recommendation there was that in the color of the light, they be 3000 K. You familiar with that?
Kelvin, yes.
Kelvin. And I noticed in the lighting plan, it didn't really specify, for example, what the K readings were going to be. It gave a range of 3,000 to 5,000 or 6,000 K. Do you know, or has that been determined yet?
Yeah, funny because I'm a kind of a closet lighting person, so I know what warmth I like. So I'm very aware of that. The truth is I didn't see it specified anywhere. I reached out to Musco today to say what's the range. I think it's fairly uniform. So I have had a lot of projects like this, and I think it's fairly uniform that's the warmth level that you get. But I will get an answer. I don't have it tonight.
Okay. Was a requirement of the Stillwell plan. And obviously some of these, you can see when you're driving around town, these LEDs and some of the street lights are very bright, very hot, very,
Or the gas station that was just 5,000 Kelvin.
Yeah. They're almost blinding and the color of the lights significant. So yes, you're right. LEDs are great. They can be adjusted appropriately, and obviously the warmer the color, the less obnoxious it is, if you happen to be looking at it. Next question on the lighting, just so I have an understanding. You show the pictures that you have up now, which, you know, looks like it's kind of gently lit on the field. But you're not showing me a picture of what it looks like if you're a house 1,000 feet away on ground level. Would the people that live on the north side of this, looking at your fields with a 70-foot light standard, would they or would they not be able to see the actual light source?
Not the light source, but they'd be able to see the field. Miss Rast, again, to her credit, is right. It's not like it's invisible. If you're at your house in your dark yard and dark all around you, you would look in the distance and you would see the ground lit up. That's what you'd see. It would look like this.
But my question is, would you be able to see the light source, or are these canned back sufficiently so that the only light that's coming out of that hits the field and that's it?
That's right.
Okay.
That's the way they're designed.
All right. Is it, did you have any discussions with your lighting folks, or with your owner for that matter, as to whether simply for a practice field, it's necessary to have the same level of lighting that you would have for a competitive field? And I'm assuming you're talking about lighting that would be adequate for a competitive soccer game. Or if it's going to be a practice field, can you do it at some lesser level?
You know, while the owners have been clear, and I say this because neighbors were at these two meetings, we're clear that they definitely want access to, you know, rec teams, community teams, things like that. There's a high interest in the Southern Johnson County, Miami County club teams. The reason that it's not grass or cheap artificial turf, but highest end, is the same thinking on the lights. When people come there to use this facility, it's to use it in the way that, you know, a highly competitive way, even though it's practice. So I don't see the owners, if they're going to do this. I mean, it's obviously millions and millions of dollars. They're going to do it to the standard, just like the dimensions of the fields are, you know, internationally recognized full-size soccer fields. So my transparent answer is I don't see them probably doing something different than what's accepted as this is a properly lit for play, because it's high level play, even though it's practice.
Okay. The obviously there's perhaps the biggest disconnect between the Stillwell plan and this is 18 feet versus which you hit with your building lights, by the way, height limitation, and the 70-foot. I think we can all accept that 70 feet is the same as a 7-story building. I mean, it's way up there. I mean, the light poles, we see the big utility poles that light up the interstate highways or whatever are about 70 feet. Some are a little more. So it's pretty high. I guess my question is, you know, where in what documents, if any, does it say they have to be that high? And I'm only concerned about it from the standpoint of, if I lived 1,000 or 1,200 feet away and you're now coming into a very dark area, a non-urban area, and I think we could all recognize if you were going to put this in 75th and Metcalf area, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. It would be good luck and go for it. You put these lights out in the country, even at a very attractive level, it has a bigger impact, just like noise does. I mean, you know, if you're in a lawnmower in the middle of the night, is a lot louder than it is, you know, when people are running it in the suburbs. So it is a factor. And my question goes back to anything that could be done to diminish that impact of a, you know, kind of a square peg in a round hole in this case, for the benefit of all these people that want to come and play soccer. And we have to, this isn't an allowed use, so we have to treat it as if it's essentially the same as rezoning this property. We're going to potentially put this there the main concern that I have, and I think most of us have, is, well, all right, it's great for those that have kids and want to bring them here to play soccer, but the poor bastards that live around there are going to have to live with this. And the question is, they don't have a right either, for that matter, to dictate what you guys can do to the nth degree, to extinguish all lighting and all noise, and that, you know, that isn't a right they have either. So we're back to this balancing test. Is there a way to balance concerns they may have with the height of these poles to get them lower, for example, and still make it work? And I'd say that because I notice on one of your charts that in the documents you provided, where it shows the luminosity readings around these fields with these lights at this, it seems to me that, yes, if you lower them, you're going to have more horizontal light bleed, but they're so far away from these houses at that point that any light bleed off those fields is going to be almost inconsequential, it seems to me. Whereas the consequence would be, if you have a pole 70 feet high, a 7-story building, and you've got 11 of them, and the building's 41 feet high, it isn't even going to screen them. So I'm looking for, you know, whether there's any, even within the realm of possibility of your people saying, you know what, we could probably get them down to 45 feet. That's where the parking lot lights are. And do the same thing without disrupting too much.
So this is super standard from all the projects I've been to, because it's a math issue. And I guess what part of math, what geometry would that be? Probably it's angles. And certainly what we all agree is it's not okay to have light source showing. So when you try to do all of that, I think that this is no taller than it needs to be. Meaning the goal wasn't to try to put in, I know you know this, but verbalizing it, the goal wasn't try to put in 70-foot light poles. It was try to have next generation LED lights that don't have pollution beyond the field, that can cover the field in an appropriate way. And the question is, how tall does that need to be to hit everything? And it was a precise, that variable is what was left at the end, and it comes up to 70 feet. I don't
question that. If I were doing it, and if I were you, I'd do exactly the same thing. The question though is, how does this impact the neighbors? And maybe it wouldn't.
And when you say that, I'm not officially asking a question. I'm thinking out loud.
I understand.
When you say impact the neighbors, is it the idea that one could see the field like this on the screen? Because I think everybody agrees, and somebody will disagree if they want to. It's not impacting the neighbors in the sense that there's a light that they're looking up and they're looking at a light. So is the idea, so I can help answer the question I think you're asking me?
My concern is I live 5 miles away from this to the west. I can see the lights at 199th and Metcalf from 5 miles away. I mean, that's because they're not LEDs, I don't think, but they're not screened, and I can see the light source. Okay. If I couldn't see the light source 5 miles away, I don't care. I mean, it's so minimal that it would be, but I can see when that light source is there. If I'm 1,000 feet away and I'm these neighbors, I've got a concern about what I'm really going to see. Now, I know you're saying you won't see the light source from that, and they are pointed. I think you did a good job of pointing them. They're not pointed towards they're pointed sort of perpendicular.
And you have deciduous trees and evergreen trees. So the idea of seeing this when you're at your house, you're blocked. So that's
so I'm expressing a concern that may not be realized. In fact, I don't know, but that is a concern I would have, that the taller those lights are, I guarantee you that if I got far enough under that, I can see the light source. The question is whether I can see it how far away. So my concern as a member of this board is, all right, if it's true that nobody's going to see the light source even at 70 feet, and that's all it's going to look like, then the question is, as you well put it, well, if you don't like that, then there's no way you're going to put anything with lights there. So, okay, you've answered my key questions, I think. I'm real interested to see what these folks have to say. And I think everybody here has to realize, people, and I've been doing this for 50 years, in these zoning deals. No, I don't want it. I don't want anything there. Doesn't play very well with me. What's the real kicker for you? What is it that's going to keep you up at night, or, you know, if this thing's shining through your window and you know, it's lighting up your bedroom at night, and that would be a non-starter for me. On the other hand, if it's not, then is your concern legit? Last question for you, Mr. Peterson. This is, if you're absolutely right, and I have no reason to think you're not or are, I don't know, but assuming you're correct with your evidence here, that this is what we would see, and there's no light glare, and how would you feel if part of the CUP said, fine, let's see what this really looks like, but let's put 2-year CUP on the lighting part of this, 10 years on the rest, and see whether it really works like you say. And if it does, maybe even say, let's light up 2 of the fields with 6 poles, see how that works for a couple of years. If they work, then come back and ask for permission to light up the other 2. Would that be anything your client would consider? And I'm just asking.
No, I know you should ask. That's understandable. I think the problem we're going to run into more than I think is on the financing, because this is also, while some people raise concern about, is this a moneymaker and all that? This is no way to make money if you're trying to make money to do this project. I don't know that I need to unpack that. Everybody kind of inside is shaking their head. Yeah, that's no way to make a lot of money, but it also is not intended to be a money loser. And part of doing that is, again, not ashamed of this. People rent the fields, they come. So the problem is when you show your lender for a multi-million-dollar project like this, your pro forma, they have to see that it's going to be lit for the hours we've talked about, et cetera, et cetera. So if you only like 2 fields, or it could get pulled away after 2 years on a loan that's much longer than that, that's kind of my project finance hat. It just doesn't work. So it doesn't mean you have to like the project, but I would say if somebody was supporting it, we really do need that 10 years, or the bank will say no.
What about, and I'm just throwing out ideas here that people have concerns of, what about you're open March, April, May, August, September, October, November? I mean, even if the sun's up, are you going to turn the lights on these fields?
No.
Okay, so if that's the case, I guess I'd almost ask, and certainly in the months when the sun is up late enough that it's naturally lit,
It won't turn.
what kind of limitations on the lights? So you're saying you're not gonna have the lights on if they're naturally illuminated. So, okay,
That's exactly right.
all right, okay. Well, I've burdened you enough. I'm
No,
sorry,
thank
but I would like to hear what everybody else has to say, or any other board members. So.
Thank you, Rod. Dan, any comments before we take a break?
Yeah, just real quick. Thank you, Ken. This is Dan Foyle. Mr. Peterson, I have a question. We've talked a lot about light, and but there's also a lot of noise that comes with the soccer. I have a 10-year-old that plays soccer, and the kids yell, the parents yell, etc. And so going until 10 o'clock at night, as in, out in Stillwell, I can hear a dog barking from about, I don't know, 3 miles away. I have some concerns around that as well. But I think the other concern that I have is around, you mentioned this is not a moneymaker, and that it's, I'd like to hear some of I know that the Isinglass Winery folks are involved, and I know that there was is this the same people that the Vors that had the equestrian estate that was at 183rd between Mission and all that sat abandoned and empty and like for a long time? Is it the same folks or different ownership?
So what I know is that they definitely have a equestrian background. I shouldn't speak to a specific piece of property because I'm not sure, but on the one I can speak to for sure is noise. Remember too, I mean, my mind wanders too. I kind of go beyond the bounds of what is proposed with the project. The outdoor fields, which is the noise we're concerned about, right? That we're asking about. The outdoor fields are practice only. And so there's really not spectators to speak of. I mean, nobody's prohibited from going there, but again, not to overly personalize it, but I know some of you are the same way. I'm a soccer dad all the time. With club stuff, you don't go watch practices. I sometimes go do work in the corner or something, but there's not a lot of spectators, and you're certainly not allowed to say anything. That's like a big taboo at a practice. So there's no yelling like that. And there's certainly no whistles and things like that. So the question is does the coach say, Javier or Will or whatever, get over on the, yeah, there's some of that. But again, proof's in the pudding, just like the lights. Go to Blue Valley North if you're interested, and you can see what I'm saying. Stand at Dover on Lamar and see what it looks like, and just do it. Or go to a sporting practice at Shields any night, Monday through Thursday. And I think what you'll find is it's just not loud. Now, again, am I saying that no one at whatever our dimensions are, right, over 1,000 feet maybe could hear something at some point if they're out in their backyard? You're right. The barking dog, right? The train, right? You can hear the train from far away. There could be some noise, but the idea that it's something, and this is for you to weigh, not for me to decide, but the idea that it's somehow lowering quality of life or something like that, I really truly believe the answer is no, not with this project as proposed in the CEP.
Okay, well, I appreciate your opinion on that. I think the other thing that you've mentioned a couple times is that this will get developed, whether it's commercial or whatever it is. I think a big difference is that a lot of those commercial developments are going to be typically done at between 5 and 6 p.m. when most of those people that back up to this are getting home. So I think, again, that's something to think about, and I certainly would think about it if it was in my backyard. So thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and take a quick technical 10-minute break. And then when we get back, we'll go ahead and open up for public comments. I do want everyone to know our Commissioner O'Hare, Charlotte O'Hare, is actually joining and will be listening in. She has been listening to the presentation and looks forward to your comments as well. So I just want to let everyone to know that she's also listening in. All right, we'll take a quick break.
You never know. I've heard that. Unfortunately.
Is Charlotte still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. And again, I want to thank Charlotte for taking the time to hear comments and be part of tonight's meeting with us on Zoom. We're going to go ahead and enter into the public comments section of the meeting. We'd ask that each person is signed up to present. And if you haven't signed up, there's still time. If you can limit your comments to about 3 minutes, that would be great. And we always ask that if you share concerns or comments or points that others have made, just comment that you potentially agree with them. And we're going to start first with the folks that are here in person.
Yes, Chairman. I have a David Harkleroad.
All right. I'm David Harkleroad, and I live at 6509 West 202nd Terrace, Bucyrus, Kansas, which puts me right next door to this thing. That's going to be in my backyard, and I have 2 lots. Okay. My concern is, okay, you guys all passed it over or whatever, but I have a real concern about flooding. Okay. I have the creek that goes through on that property line. There's a creek back there that it will overflow, and that creek is 3 feet deep. Okay. You're going to have all these soccer fields over there, plus the parking lot, plus the drainage off the roofs of these buildings, and it's going to go right down into that creek. I'm pretty sure you haven't done a flood study on it, but I know that that water comes out of that creek into my backyard. Okay. The second property that I have, that creek goes across the property. Okay. And floods out on that about 10 feet from the creek bank. So I don't know if you all have done a 100-year study on the flood, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Now, if you follow that creek down, it will go under the railroad track through 2 2-foot culverts, goes under the track. Okay. And that thing is wet probably 70% of the time. It's dry right now, but it stays wet quite a bit of the time. Okay. Second thing I got is I don't really understand. Okay. I don't really have a problem with the lights. Okay. I'm an electrical engineer and I deal with lighting and things like that. And as far as I'm concerned, you can make that thing, as long as you got directional beams on that thing, the higher you make that pole, the better. Because what's really going to be the problem is the reflected light. Okay. Coming at what you're not going to see the source. You will not see the source. Okay. If it's done right, there's no source. But you're going to have a lot of reflected light. Okay. And that's the real concern there is how much actual reflected light you have. Okay. 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 I have a question as to why we chose this piece of property, because I'm really not against this. I got 10 grandkids and you know, they love play soccer and I got to take them all over the place to play. So I know that there is definitely a shortage of these facilities. But on the other hand, you're putting this thing between two residential areas. I don't understand if you could put this on the other side of the street. I think it'd be a great site. You know, you put it on the west side of Metcalf, and it's an excellent thing. Or you got Stillwell Park over there, and there's a lot next to it that's just the same size, and you don't have the drainage problem. I think that would be a much better spot. And I really think you ought to rezone that whole area there as residential, because why would you want to put any kind of commercial area between two housing? It's a small area.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry, next.
Greg Meredith. And it says Jill as well. Are you wanting to speak together or one at a time? Okay.
Greg Meredith, 6813 West 202 Terrace, Stillwell. I built that house in 1985. When I built that house, it was zoned residential and agriculture. So I don't know where this 1982 came from. So if anybody wants to, that's what the county told me in 1985. Doesn't matter. It's zoned another way. Nobody ever told me anything about it. Have a problem with the lighting. Your traffic study is so ridiculous. You live out here? You live out there? Yeah. Miss Kelly, you do. Yeah. I mean, you've seen it. I'm not against progress. It's coming. A Walmart's going to be next to the KCP&L one day. Who knows? I mean, they should have widened the bridge when they did it at Little Blue, because we're going to be 4-lane coming out here. I thought that was dumb that they didn't do that. Having said that, the noise, I live right behind this. You can't tell me it is a money-making operation. He's not sinking $5 million into this because he loves kids that much. I think we have a generation of people that don't say no to their children. That gentleman right there said he drove to Liberty. Drove to Liberty to take his kid to a soccer game? Okay, that's fine. That's his business. I thought there was a learning lesson there, but evidently he didn't think so. I mean, it's great. Kids are important. My kids were important. But I was raised by Depression-era parents, and for every time I got a yes, I got 50 no's. I think just for the reason of saying no. I don't think we say no to our kids often enough. Lighting, traffic, noise. Right there behind me. The water is an issue. Everybody on that street has a sump pump that kicks on. In a wet year, my neighbor Brad next door owns Briggs Sod Farm. About every 15, 20 minutes, he's got 2 lines. I got 1. Mine on a wet year, every 45 minutes. If you don't have a battery backup, you're going to get water in your basement. I have 2 battery backups. Then I have a sump sitting next to it. So yeah, the water coming off those buildings is going to add. That whole area is a floodplain. That's really all I have to say about it.
Thank you.
Jill, are you still a maybe? All right, Jill Meredith.
Yeah, I'm Jill Meredith, 6813 West 202 Terrace. I dislike immensely getting up and speaking in front of a group of people. I want to make that very clear. One of the main reasons that I love living where I have lived since 1985, there's no street lights on my street. After about 6 o'clock in the evening, there's no traffic noise. I like my privacy. I like my quiet. I've raised my babies there. They're now grown and I'm a grandmother. I feel very safe there. And I think about the tournaments that will be taking place. And we have a good friend of ours who is a soccer guy. His name is Hugh Williams. He owns CSI Sports. And we have sat down and spoken with him at great length. And he's given us basically the financials on this deal that will be happening for this family that owns sections and sections and sections of land out in Lacine. So they have all the privacy and all the quiet and all the dark that they would like to have in their life. So I feel very strongly about this, and I'm not going to stand here and ask questions about lighting or traffic or anything, because I'm completely and totally 100% against it. No matter what anybody moves, no matter what anybody does, nothing. And I'm not a very politically correct person. And I'm also a nonconformist. I was raised by a World War II veteran that was an extreme nonconformist. Thank God. So that's really all I have to say. I did hear several things during this meeting, during a certain presentation that I felt was words that my mom would have grounded me for saying. Total and complete. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Marlene Carter. I have it ready for you right here, Marlene.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 6 minutes? Phil Weiss said I could have some of his time.
That's fine. Who you also speaking for?
What? Myself. I live,
And-
I'm Marlene Carter,
And where's the other 3 minutes coming from?
Phil Weiss.
Okay. Bill,
I live at 7301 Black Bob Drive in Stillwell, Kansas. I live in the Black Bob Estate subdivision. There's an entrance from Metcalf onto 191st there and onto 188th. And I want to talk about the Metcalf soccer fields. Okay, there's golden criteria, as you guys know. And those are legal standards that have to be satisfied to make a development legal. And I believe this development is not satisfying those. I think it will detrimentally affect the neighborhood, which is one of the golden criteria. It will affect traffic. So as I heard, it's going to be staggered every 15 minutes with up to like 18 to 20 players per each team and 15 on the field or 11 on the field. And I guess I put 278, but I guess it's going to be like 374 parking places. So that's changed. And some of the fields might be used by more than one team. Depending on the age, they might use a fourth of a field, a half of a field, or a whole field. So I bet the traffic study said 6 cars per hour, but I bet it's going to be a lot more than that. And it's hard for me to get out sometimes on 188th at Metcalf right now. I almost get hit. I see glass in the intersection. It's a rolling hill and it's like a blind turnout. I mean, sometimes if someone's speeding over the hill. And according to car culture, traffic studies are junk science based on their sample size, are often small, old, taken from unrepresentative context, producing poor measures of traffic generation. And the Overland Park City planner said to me that Metcalf will be 4 lanes with sidewalks all the way to the Miami County line. So Overland Park's planning to do that in conjunction with Johnson County. If this occurs, there will be strip malls and apartments, and this will change the character of Stillwell. And the character of Stillwell is a golden criteria. And I think this will help spur it on because there'll be traffic here, so they'll have to widen the road. And the soccer fields will generate an additional need for development. Busy moms and dads will want to go to convenience stores and fast food restaurants. And this is against the Stillwell community plan. To the extent feasible, the plan says maintain the area's low traffic volume and existing transportation system to assure continued mobility, access, and safety throughout the local network system of Stillwell. Okay, and so one of the golden criteria is to maintain the character of the neighborhood. So where these neighbors live on 202nd is residential, and they actually do not remember receiving a notice for a public hearing to change it to light industrial. So I'm sure that was done, but you might want to double check that. So I think that light industrial should actually be zoned residential. There would be 1 house per every 2 acres because you need 2 acres for sewers. It's like 6 acres, and you would need some roads. So that would be maybe 15 to 20 houses, and that would be a lot less intensive traffic. Traffic will add noise, light pollution, and congestion,
I'm sorry.
as well as only having, I'm sorry.
You can keep going. I'm just checking to make sure the time is still going.
Okay. Only a 2-lane road and a blinking light. Stillwell's character is rural, peaceful, and without traffic. And also there will be light pollution around the building security lights. I don't know if I guess there wasn't any perimeter lights on there, but like from the soccer field lights too. According to the lighting standards, the Stillwell community value, it's nighttime dark sky above the historic rural community. It contributes to the health of the citizen and the wildlife. And they want to stop light spillage to preserve nighttime enjoyment of their property in the nighttime sky. Also, they don't want it to be bright and obtrusive, create a glare or light trespass on adjoining properties and streets. So they said that they have to turn out the lights 30 minutes after they close. So that would be 10 p.m. So the lights could be on till 10:30. If there's another iteration of this conditional use permit, they might go to 11, like at Shield Soccer Field. And so that would be 11:30. And also with the lights, there's a park there And I take my daughter there and she's autistic and she is very sensitive to noise and lights. So that will be really glaring there. Okay, my other concerns is the cost to refurbish the turf, which is really expensive at the Shield soccer fields, and Overland Park ended up having to pay for that. I don't know if our county taxpayers would have to pay for that. And then also other future iterations of the conditional use permit. They've already, I think at the second meeting, they said that they were going to only use the indoor soccer field on weekends. Now it's going to be used during the week for practices. So things are changing, like the amount of parking places are changing. So the use of the game fields outside for maybe tournaments or hours extensions. So I don't think this plan fits the golden rule. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker, Anthony Walker.
Thank you. I'm Anthony Walker. I do not live within 1,000 feet of the field, but my address is 7912 West 95th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. I am a resident of Johnson County, though, and I would like to voice my full support for this project. Youth soccer is tremendously popular in the KC metro area. We have the nickname of the soccer capital of the United States, and we're hosting the World Cup in 2026. In Johnson County specifically, our youth soccer leagues are the largest in the nation, larger than Los Angeles or New York. The benefit of soccer for kids is substantial. The game teaches youth players valuable lessons that can navigate them through life. It also increases their social skills and teaches the importance of sportsmanship and responsibility. Soccer is a sport of inclusivity for all ages, genders, races, and backgrounds. And as an added bonus, it keeps kids fit and healthy. However, there are many challenges for players, coaches, parents, and administrators. The most prominent and longstanding of those challenges has been field availability. Simply put, there are not enough outdoor and indoor fields to accommodate the large number of teams seeking space to play. Even though there are other soccer complexes, the fact of the matter is they are not sufficient for the number of teams in the area and are not made widely available for everyone. Many teams have to resort to hosting practices at fields that are unkept or even unsafe at times. Teams struggle to find consistent locations to play. They have inappropriate start times for the age of their players, meaning kindergartners or younger kids play at later times, and have unreasonable commutes. For example, driving to Liberty to go to practice. New soccer fields would alleviate those challenges. Players would have a safe local place to play with quality fields. Parents would not need to drive halfway across the city to get their kid to soccer. Players would also have convenient practice times, not needing to sacrifice their health, academic focus, or quality time with family. In addition, I believe this project would have a positive impact. Parks provide intrinsic environmental, aesthetic, and recreational benefits to a community. They're also a source of positive economic benefits. This specific project comes from an independent investor and doesn't require any taxpayer money, so there won't be a monetary burden on the community. A soccer park specifically creates opportunities for children, growth through skill development, improving athletic abilities, and pursuing personal goals. It increases community pride and unity through support for local teams and events. Lastly, it creates a sense of belonging and inclusivity for individuals of all backgrounds. In summation, I fully support this project and believe the addition of new soccer fields would be a tremendous benefit to Southern Johnson County. I respectfully and humbly request that this board gives the necessary approval for this project to become a reality. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, our next speaker is Greg Haddle. Greg Haddle.
Actually, it's Hadel, but I've been called worse. Good day. I'm Greg Hadel. I live at 4850 West 207th Street, Bucyrus. So as you come down Metcalf, you pass 206. The next street is 207th. Could you guys please bring up the map showing the 30,000 foot view of of the proposed project, the one that they use to show where it is in Metcalf. If you'll notice on this map, across the street is a racetrack that was formerly approved. Hasn't been built yet, but that can hold several hundred cars, 300, 400, 500 cars when they do their racing. And that does plan on being developed. I talked to the developer. So when that's developed and you have hundreds of cars coming to and from the racetrack, and then you also have Weir's Construction on 207th Street. They have heavy equipment coming out, large bulldozers, excavators. They drive very slow. You can see across the street, 207th Street, where that little pond is, there's Weir's Construction. And right there to the north, there's the racetrack. There's condos. It could be hundreds of condos. There's going to be a lot of traffic here. It's wishful thinking to think there's not a traffic problem. And I'll bet you when you guys did your traffic study, you did not take that in consideration. Metcalf is a 2-lane rural road. It's used by farmers with combine equipment that drive very slow, that take up both lanes. There's farms north, south, east, and west of that location. The traffic is going to be a problem. There's no turning lane. There's no proposed land improvement. There's nothing at all to mitigate the traffic problem. So if you think there's not going to be a traffic problem, there is. The second, the noise and the light pollution, it's going to be bad. This is a commercial facility. It belongs on 135th Street, along with Blue Valley Parks and Recs. I used to coach sports. I know what it's like to have teams coming and going. This has 6 fields, 2 teams per field. That's 12 teams. 12 teams that are playing, 12 teams that are coming to warm up, and you got another 12 teams exchanging. You have hundreds of cars that are going to be impacting us on a regular basis. They talk about no sewers. They're going to use private septic systems, thousands of people flushing tens of thousands of gallons of water. You're going to destroy the environment. Not to mention the park across the street. These soccer fields are proposed hundreds of feet away with the lighting and the noise. The people who are autistic and Down syndrome that use this park, who's speaking up for them? I have a niece that has Down syndrome. She goes to the park on a regular basis. There are people in here that have relatives that are autistic. This is destroying their value. It hasn't taken consideration. Bottom line is, this is not compatible or conducive with the surrounding neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood that lives to the north and you live in that northern neighborhood, then your property values are going to go in the toilet. I promise you that. Nobody's going to want to live next to a commercial facility like this. Thank you.
All right, we had one more person on Zoom that raised their hand, and they are identified as S. I have allowed you to speak. If you will please make sure to state your name and address.
Yes, Brandon Rusnick, 20209 Lamar. Basically, just as the neighborhood and the road turns north, I'm on the corner of that there. I just have a question that anybody that's proposing this, are they affected by the day-to-day traffic, or are they commuting to this facility because it's easy for them to get to and don't have to deal with it other than when they come to practice? All I have.
All right, there is no others that have signed up to speak, but I know somebody has asked me if they could speak, so. Go ahead. Please remember to state your name and address.
Sure. Hi. I do not like public speaking either. My name is Amy Bowe, and I live at 6801 West 202nd Terrace, so lot number 7 on your diagram there. So I will be directly impacted by this. My family is going to be directly impacted. My neighbors are going to be directly impacted, and I think Greater Stillwell will be directly impacted by this proposal. So first thing I want to talk about is traffic. And I know that people have tried to explain this traffic report to me. I've had the opportunity to read through it. I strongly encourage you to grab a cup of coffee, sit down and read it. And it failed. I still don't understand it. So I know you had mentioned it's 100 cars in and out at peak period, but But if you look at the traffic study, what it's saying is that 100 is broken out to 60 coming in and 30 going out, 60 some and 30 some going out. If you have 6 soccer fields, I don't comprehend how only 60 cars are coming in at one time. So someone needs to take a deeper look into this traffic to find out like what's really going on with the soccer field. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I think there is a large concern that this traffic could be quite substantial. It's going to back up on Metcalf. I do still have a fear that it's going to come down 202nd. I know that was addressed today, so I appreciate that. But I think we need to realize that neighborhood has no sidewalks. There are no street lights. There are kids that play in the street because it's a safe environment for the most part, right? And I appreciate everyone talking about the park, right? It's a special needs inclusive park. There's also kids and special needs kids in that neighborhood, right? So we have to think about it holistically. The other thing that does concern me is the lighting. So we chose to live in Stillwell because Stillwell is a gym. It is so different and unique. I tease my family. I live in the prairie paradise. I love it, right? I can sit on my back deck. I can watch the stars. There's hardly any noise. And if it is, it's a dog barking or the coyotes, right? And I love that. And I think you guys are in a unique position to figure out as Stillwell grows, and it will grow. I'm not naive to know that things are going to change. You guys own what does that future of Stillwell look like and what do we want to be? And I'm very concerned with this project and what it's going to bring to Stillwell. And that's it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Julie Billier, and I love public speaking. These are my neighbors. I live at 6509 West 201st Terrace, so I am within the 1,000-foot bubble. But I also, and I only say this because it's germane, I've been in the City of Overland Park Parks and Rec Department for 25 years. I manage their large events. I do July 4th and the Fall Festival. To say I understand traffic management is an understatement. I've been doing it for a long time. Currently, I'm working on the Deanna Rose Children's Farmstead holiday light thing. We're trying to figure that out. Oh my God, traffic. I could talk forever. I do want to thank the Johnson County staff. I know what kind of work they put into this. Thank you. And sir, your presentation, your numbers were spot on. Thank you for that. I do agree with my neighbors. I would rather have the quiet, and I'm an amateur astronomer. I have 2 telescopes. I will lose Jupiter. I will lose Saturn. I will lose Neptune. I will lose Uranus. That's just a fact. I understand his LED statement. I understand all those numbers, and I understand the light reflectivity off the surface of the field, which is something to be considered. I also understand the need for more soccer in the area. All of you sitting there, I get it. I really do. I was in a meeting this morning with Mike LaPlante, who manages the Shields Soccer Complex. I understand. They've got 2 tournaments coming up in December. The final kick is at 8 o'clock at night. So to say that the lights are going to be off at 10 o'clock, maybe not. You know, it depends on how long the game goes. And yes, kids deserve that. But I think this was poorly thought out. And I'm sorry, because I know how hard you worked. I do like my current industrial neighbors. They're quiet. They keep their lights down low. They don't have them 70 feet up in the air, which is where they have to be for a soccer field. I'm not arguing that point. I would actually like to have a soccer field out in the south end of the county. I think it's warranted, but I think you're shoehorning it into too small a space that isn't really the best option you can find. And I loathe to tell a property owner what they should or should not do with their property, because I don't want you saying that to me. But please, I would ask you to reconsider. At a minimum, I think you need to redo your traffic study, and my opinion on that is considered at least expert. So I would ask you to rework those numbers, sir. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Hafner and I live at 6900 West 201st Terrace. So you step out on my front porch and you will look right down the street and see this. So I would like to echo lots of stuff everybody said. I have two main concerns. My first concern is traffic, like Amy said right there. My property is 400 feet from Metcalf. So I see all that traffic all day long. I can tell which one of my neighbors are coming home because I can hear their cars and I know what they sound like. It's that close. The Stonegate motor complex on 207th Street that he talked about earlier, they used to do something called coffee and cars every Saturday morning. And when those cars came and when they left, there was no way for me to leave my street on Saturday mornings. Literally, I had to go around to go somewhere. And when you start talking about the traffic study, I believe is flawed. Amy showed that. The number of cars that are coming and going, and we're not doing that on just the weekends. We're talking about during the week, right? So when Travis is coming home from work and he's coming south on Metcalf and he has to turn left into 202nd Terrace, how's he going to do that when there's 30 cars coming this way? Plus the ESS excavation trucks, the Ron Muir stuff, all of that. There's a lot of traffic there. That concerns me. We love living in Stillwell too. When we moved to Stillwell almost 11 years ago, we rented a house there because I'm like, I don't really know. And then we bought the house next door and we lived there for 11 years. It's a special place. We know our neighbors. We built a porch onto the front of our house, not onto the back, so we could sit on the front porch and we could talk to our neighbors. So when Travis and Amy walk by walking their dogs, we talk to them. When Kathy's walking her dogs up, we wave to the neighbors. It's a special kind of place. I get the youth soccer thing. I have an 18-year-old son. He's played soccer since he was 4 years old. You're right. There is not enough in South Johnson County, but this is not the right place. We drove to the Wyandotte soccer field, which up by the Legends, twice a week for practice and once or twice a week for games. I totally get it, but this is not the right place. Stillwell's not the right place. We need it, yes, but not in Stillwell. So thank you for your time.
No, sir. And I just reminded them to raise their hand or dial *9, and nobody has raised their hand. No problem.
That I'm going to go ahead and close the
Hey, Ken, this is Dan. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'll start over. Thank you, Dan. We're going to go and do questions of the zoning board staff or the public. Two things came up that I wanted to get additional clarification on. One from the applicant related to the stormwater plan that was submitted, if they can comment on that in relation to the flooding concerns. And then also I would like to for staff to respond to the position the county is in being able to do a traffic study as compared to the applicant study and if what that would look like. If we can first hear from the applicant though.
Chairman.
Yep. Button there.
In regards to the storm water, could we have this exhibit? Is this available to be put up so we can see what the floodplain is for these neighborhoods? Is this option? What's that? Are these are these not floodplains?
No, those are tree coverage. I don't believe there's technically any 100.
We have a map of the floodplain.
I don't think there's any floodplain on the property.
Well, we have a map of the directional flow. Yeah, this has direction of flow. It all flows towards the gentleman's lot that came up.
All right, go.
Sorry.
We'll let the applicant respond first. Well. And Brad, I
Yeah,
also know we
there-
have available games, Public Works is also available, but we
Chairman, if
wanted to first hear from the applicant.
Chairman, if I could jump in quick.
Yes,
There-
please, Michelle.
The property contains no floodplain.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm always happy to answer your questions and I will, but this is one of those instances where I know I'm going to say the same thing as Public Works. And I imagine you probably want to hear it from your own staff. We follow the code. You have to do no harm. There's absolutely nothing that this property will do from a stormwater perspective that would harm other properties. We have a preliminary stormwater study that our civil engineer from Phelps Engineering had to turn in. It was studied by Public Works. I could go on, but staff, I won't speak for staff, but staff can step in here. I mean, it's a very exacting process. It's not a guess. There will be no stormwater issues caused by this project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have Public Works staff here too that can talk to the specifics of any questions on stormwater.
Scott Kariorgis, Public Works. Just in addition to the stormwater questions you had, the applicant did provide a drainage study with this project that met all of our stormwater criteria, and they're providing on-site detention basin at the northeast corner in order to limit stormwater runoff and minimize downstream impacts. Staff did review and accept that study. Like I said, it conforms to local stormwater criteria. And happy to answer any other questions you might have in regards to storm.
Thank you. Good, Rod.
I do, Rod Richardson. While you're up there, I was going to ask Mr. Peterson this, but one of the other of you can answer on sheet C4 of PEI's detention basin drawings up at the top, right at the opening of it. Says there's a little note that says construct emergency spillway, C section, this sheet. Can you explain what that is? It sounds sort of ominous, but it probably isn't. But I'd be curious to know. My experience, these are usually dry detention basins. In fact, I've rarely ever seen water in any of them that people have built, but it does say emergency spillway. So what does that mean?
Yep. So these are typically designed for multiple storm events. So the applicant had an engineer design this for the 100-year as required. That emergency overflow spillways for a storm that would be larger than the 100-year or 1% storm event.
If we have, because we have had 100-year storms,
Sure.
5-year intervals or whatever. If the water somehow came out of that emergency spillway, in your opinion, on behalf of Public Works, would that create a flood threat to any of the adjoining homes?
Right. That was actually one of our comments throughout this process, was to look at downstream impact and analyze that. And they sufficiently did that in the study. So there's a swale downstream here, I think, like some of the residents mentioned. So
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Michelle or Sean, would you be able to comment on the position of a traffic study being done by the county as opposed to the applicant provided traffic study? And if that's something that's historically been done or on the table?
Mr. Chairman, Sean Penley, planning staff. That's a good question. Actually, Scott was just there. Scott, we may want to call him back up. We did, as Public Works staff, did consult with a third-party engineer for review of the traffic impact study. They're not here this evening, but Scott would be better to address that review as to whether or not we could do an additional analysis. Certainly staff would look at any additional information that's provided. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Public Works on that, but I'll see if Scott can provide a better answer than that.
Yeah. Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, the concern is, I tend to agree that I don't trust the traffic study that was done. I understand it was done, but living down there, looking at the traffic, knowing that four-way stop at 5 p.m. and first thing in the morning, it gets a little busy. So if we're going to add this volume, I'm not sure I have faith that the traffic study it's really representative of what's happening and what's developing down there.
Sure. Yeah, if there's more specific questions in regards to maybe some of the supporting calculations or the modeling that was done like that.
What's the review process you go through?
Yeah, so Public Works staff did review and accept the study. And then like Sean mentioned, in addition, we knew from the neighborhood meetings that this would be a kind of a strong issue with the site. So we had a third party engineer do a review as well. So yeah, we'll typically review to make sure it's conforming. We fall back on a lot of KDOT standards in regards to traffic. And then as others mentioned, there's some industry standards. Those are kind of set by a combination of MUTCD and then the ITE manuals and HCM. So it's really
and
it's kind of a check to make sure they're complying with traffic engineering standards that we would see on any project. And if there's any recommendations, we'll do a check on those as well to see.
And did
does
it take
make
into,
sense? You know?
did it take in consideration the intersection at 199th Metcalf, the blinking red light?
This is just
in
north
the
of the
study?
site that you're talking about.
Mhm.
Yes, that was in the study.
Okay.
Yep.
Kelly Russ, I have a question about that. So did you guys actually figure how many cars would be coming and going at a interchange time, like with the fields, like, and because the numbers and figure out how many numbers those are versus what you're saying was allowed? Because were they saying that there was the assumption of 60 cars? But there's going to be far more than that just to, if all the teams show up the same time, and then teams are leaving. So those numbers don't really add up.
Yeah, I think I understand your question. I would like to defer on that one to the applicant for their engineer, the engineer who did the study, to maybe provide an answer. I don't know if they can do that today or at a later time, but
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
My internal concept is, we talked about that the soccer complex will not trigger road improvements, although additional development will require potential road improvements at that time. So to me, it feels like, all right, are we right at the limit, and are we passing the buck to the next applicant that they're gonna have to do road improvements? Because there's a lot of already approved development that's occurred down here.
Yep.
That's just the concern I have.
Sure. Scott Caryorgis, Public Works. So yeah, we typically at the county, we've got the CARNA in place as a guideline, and then we'll review the traffic impact study as needed, depending on the project. And those typically will have them look at the surrounding area, and as they did in this study. So as far as future development goes, we would definitely need to see a detailed analysis and a study. It is highly dependent on the type of project and how many trips you're generating and all that good information. So I hope that answers your question, but
it does. Thank you.
Okay.
This Keller, I do have a question though. So, okay, but here's like another situation. When we were discussing the baseball field on 191st and that CUP, the traffic study did not take into account the Rod Rock neighborhood that was, going up, and that's going to be 225 homes. Why? And now that's a known. Why would they not take that into effect, knowing that that's going to be off 191st too? So like when you say that you take in account for future or other projects or other things, my understanding when this came up, they didn't take that into case, and that, and that's well on its way.
Okay.
So can you clarify that a little bit?
Being a separate project, it might be better to address that separately. I do want to get you a good answer on that specifically, but I'm not sure.
It just doesn't really seem like
I don't know the details of that. You're talking about a future development.
Well, it doesn't seem like, we always hear that things are taken in consideration, but there's not really hard, cold facts. And then when we have situations arise, then nobody has answers for us. So are they being taken into consideration? Are they not? And then also before, if this is right on the cusp and the next project, whether it's the racetrack or whatever, you're already going to increase the amount of cars, and then you're going to try and do the infrastructure part. I mean, it just sounds like we're not doing this very practical, but
Step behind.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Sean Penley, planning staff, I would note, for these types of questions, the applicant, one of the things that Public Works staff did outline for the applicant is a scope of study. They were required to study the area in question that would be attributed to traffic impacts on this development. This development, they take into consideration daily trips, existing traffic volume on the street that is affected for the development. As to whether or not there may be additional developments even further up north or south along Metcalf, absolutely, there are going to be additional developments as it's going to increase. I don't think that they necessarily need to consider all of those other developments. They needed to consider the scope that they were required to look at for this study. They did that. Traffic will continue to increase. There is no doubt about it. So they did look at a specific scope. The applicant followed that scope and they submitted that as part of the study. It was reviewed and analyzed, but certainly there will be additional development that will contribute to that. So if that helps answer the question, it certainly is something that we know it is dynamic. It is not going to just be stuck at the level it is today as existing traffic. It will continue to increase, but they did look at a scope and they did follow that scope of the study.
yeah, Killers, I agree with that. But when things are already in the pipeline, we should be taking in consideration. So I'm hearing you say that it's a very limited scope of what they're looking at, and they're not taking in account for the projects that are very well known and in the books to be done, and there's numbers with those. So, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Rod Richardson, to either one of you, you may be able to answer, but I just want to make sure I understand this. So Metcalf is supposed to ultimately be, or is considered a type 2 arterial street, right? That's what it under Carnap. But and ideally it would be, or at least now, a type B collector, which would be 24-foot width street with 8-foot shoulders, an open ditch, and 80 feet of right of way. And we know that the applicant's dedicating right of way. All right. So it would be 24 feet, 8 feet shoulders and all that. But am I correct that right now it's 24 feet wide, has 4-foot shoulders and open ditches on either side? That's what we're looking at today. All right. And you're saying that after you completed all of the studies that you have done, whatever they were and however they were arrived at, it's your opinion that this road as it presently exists is adequate to handle whatever traffic this project produces?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions of applicant or staff? Dan, any questions?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll have discussion among the board related to the application. Anyone? Kelly?
Kelly Rice. For the record, I don't think anybody up here is against kids soccer. This is always the board has to look at things from obviously a location standpoint and development and what we feel is best suited. So, just didn't want anybody to think that that's a thing to if anybody looked at past zoning boards, I was against the commercial baseball situation on 191st for all the same reasons, and it didn't have lights and it wasn't nearly, at this capacity. So again, as much as it's for the kids or whatever, but we have to look at the surrounding community for the kids. So I just feel like this has a lot of things that's just a little bit too much for the location. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, this presents a lot of issues in trying to balance this out, because clearly, from everything we've heard, those folks that live closest to this, that would be impacted the greatest, have expressed considerable and unequivocal opposition to what they think might happen as a result of this. On the other hand, Public Works has testified, staff has testified with their staff report We've got a whole lot of other folks that think it's a good idea that I suspect don't live anywhere near it, but would be benefited by it for their kids. So we have some conflicting views here. So I guess my first comment would be that, you know, when you get to play the role of whoever's sitting up here, and we don't decide this, by the way, I hope everybody understands that we're just a recommending body. Whatever we say, good, bad, or indifferent, it goes to the Board of County Commissioners. They make the final decision. And then once they've made a decision, anybody that's unhappy with that has all sorts of legal rights to appeal that if they want to. So we're just a recommending body. We do the best we can with that. We are charged at this point with listening to and considering quite a few different things. The first thing we have to listen to is the applicant and everything that they have told us. Their experts have told us, all of the information they've given us. We're obliged to listen to the professional staff and consider what they've had to say. And we know they're recommending both the plat exceptions as well as this, with a number of stipulations to moderate the impact. We're required to listen to what other zoning board members have to say. We're required to listen to what the public has to say, but the public comments are just one of many things we're supposed to listen to. We're supposed to listen to legal if legal has comment. And maybe at the end of the day, our own experiences as board members, we're entitled to consider that. So all those things are in play here. And how those things balance out. So we're stuck in this, at least I think we're stuck in this position of trying to figure out, well, it's zone PEC3. Anything that would be allowed in PEC3 could go there, but that doesn't include an athletic field because that isn't allowed anywhere without a conditional use permit. So here's an application for a CUP, and now we've got to figure out whether you can shave enough of the negative impact potential off of this to make it work. And that's really where we are. And I think the applicant's done a good job. All of you people that have testified or written letters have done as good a job as I've ever seen of expressing your concerns. So it's really falls back to us now as board members to figure out, you know, whether there is enough here to support it or not. I'd like to hear what the other board members have to say before I make a final decision on kind of where I'm coming down on this thing. But I do think there are some things we can say to clarify what I know some of you are concerned about. And that is, you know, one of the staff on the golden criteria. And by the way, those aren't laws. They're just things we're supposed to consider. Is whether, you know, this use is consistent with the golden criteria. Well, it's a conditional use permit. If, you know, it's, I don't think you know, is it consistent with other uses in the area? Of course not. There's no other athletic field in the area. There's no, you know, there's no other place that has outside concession stands or outside restrooms. There's no place with 70-foot lighting standards. There's no place with 246 or 300 and some parking spaces. They don't have any place else around the area with 9 to 15 players playing on practice fields, et cetera. So that's not the point. The point is that, you know, whether this particular type of use can be made to fit in this. Is it an objectionable square peg in a round hole or not? That said, I believe that it would not be unreasonable for this board to consider at some point, and I'm prepared to make it, maybe, after I hear what everybody else says, that there might be a way to further change these stipulations to carve further issues off of this in a way that would allow this to potentially work, to see if it does work, particularly on the lighting. My number one concern is lighting. I don't think there's another issue here that merits great concern, but the lighting does. And I personally am a dark sky enthusiast, but that's not the law. But it's certainly something we should look at. The Stillwell plan certainly goes to that. We have to look at that. We've already heard that it's been adopted. So whatever we do on this, if it were going to be approved, would have to get an awful lot closer to meeting those standards than where it is right now, in my opinion. So any motion I would make would be primarily addressing that and a couple of other issues. So I'll hold that in abeyance till I see what everybody else has to say.
This is Ken. I'll comment, make my comments now, and then hear from Dan and Fred. My lighting stipulations would be no lighting. I think from the project, I still don't necessarily believe the traffic report, but the county, the facts are there. They've done their assessment. So we have to have belief in that the traffic's not going to be an issue. But the Stillwell Community Park was designed and built without lighting. We're going to have 2 soccer fields that are in planning for that property. Neither of those fields will have lighting. The walking path doesn't have lighting. There is no lighting in that area. And for what we've heard through the Stillwell Community Plan, through the community, we are a dark sky community. We want a dark sky community where Aubrey Township's actually taken steps to get recognized as a dark sky international community, which would require a resolution by the board. But we're taking those steps to keep ourselves in a dark sky. We do have Overland Park creeping in around us, but they're not here today where we are. And for me, this could not move forward with any type of lighting. Building lighting similar to we have on the baseball academy, of course. Field lighting, 70-foot towers, absolutely. I could not support even one of those coming into the community. So that's kind of where I stand. Fred, Dan?
Mr. Chairman, Fred Wingert. So if we start with conditional use permits and we look at Article 23 of the Johnson County zoning and subdivision, the purpose of conditional use permits, the article provides criteria and procedures for conditional uses which may be properly allowed upon consideration in each of the cases, among other things, the impact upon neighboring land and community, period. Conditional use permits provide unique and special impacts upon the location, design, lifespan, size, method of operation, traffic circulation, similar other characteristics which impact on available or provided public facilities, which may be considered individually. If you look at what this property was zoned, and there's some discussion by the folks that live by it, and I think that's primarily what we're here to consider. That's what the conditional use standard says. We're supposed to consider what its impact on around it. Soccer's great. That's not what we're debating tonight. We're debating whether it's appropriate for a conditional use permit on a property. The term in less intensive, I don't agree with that. If you look at the vast majority of the uses that PEC3 allows, they would be less impactful on the community a majority of the time. Majority of time people are in their homes. It depends on what you do for a living, if you work from home, but it is after, 4:30, 5 o'clock and on the weekends. That's when people are home, right? And the impact of this facility is incredibly intrusive upon that relative to most of the other uses that are designed for PEC3. I'm opposed to this on the lighting standard. I'm opposed to this on what it does to the community. Yes, it is going to develop. A soccer facility like this should be on a road like 199th that has a turning lane. Metcalf is exceptionally narrow. You can talk about traffic studies all you want. I drive it multiple times a day. It's super narrow. There's about as much width to me and Sean as the telephone poles. Okay, so one wrong turn and you're taking out the telephone poles that line this entire property. The other side, it's not like it's a giant, the traffic studies, the concerns there when the KC motor, when their truck stops to unload cars, traffic backs up to unload the cars. For folks that live out there, this is not the appropriate location. And given the criteria that we have for special use permits, it does not meet that criteria, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Foyle, Dan?
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I would just echo what Kelly and Ken and Fred, what yourself said. I don't think it's appropriate. And, the impact on the people that neighbor it is significant. And I don't have much else to add. Sorry, I can't be there in person, but y'all don't want my cold either.
Thanks, Dan. Any additional discussion? Anyone have a motion?
Well, I have a motion I'd like to make it, see if it even, whether it gets a second is debatable, but I think county commissioners should at least have, know what this board doesn't accept. And I understand the board's concern. My concern is that, you know, I'm even the Stillwell plan doesn't preclude outside lighting. Conditional use permits don't, you know, preclude what this applicant is deciding. I'm afraid we're getting really far away from what the rules are about this stuff. And I don't think that's particularly helpful. In a perfect world, I would personally love to eliminate every outside light there is, particularly farm lights and all of the heavy duty lighting people put on the outside, that the lighting I can see from 5 miles away. I love dark skies. I would much prefer that there were no outside lighting. And if I were king of the world, I would eliminate all of it, except turn it on when you're using it, turn it off. That's me personally. That's not what the law and the rules here say we're dealing with. So I don't feel like I can impose my personal, you know, wishes on this applicant. And again, we're just a recommending body. I do think that what is being proposed is too much for this site. And my motion that I'm going to make now, just to put it out on the floor, is intended to try to moderate that. I have no idea whether it's would even be acceptable to the applicant, but I want it on the record anyway. So my motion is to approve the CUP on the following conditions, and that is on all of the stipulations which the staff has specified, with the following specific exceptions. Exception number 3, I think the parking spaces that the applicant has suggested are adequate. He has proposed that if we find out they're not adequate, that he's willing to add them later. I would adopt the applicant's suggestion on that. I would change as the second change that the hours of operation of the outside fields stop at 9 p.m. The landscape along the back, I would require these landscaping plantings to be 40 feet on center, not 50. And as to the lighting, my proposal on this motion is that only fields 3 and 4, the two essentially behind the building, would be illuminated, and that the maximum pole height on field 3 and 4 would be 40 feet, and that they be 3000 K in terms of the light temperature. I would also include that there would be no outside field lighting before 1 hour before sunset. And finally, the conditional use permit that I would propose would be for 10 years on the building and everything else related to the building, but only 2 years on the illuminated fields 3 and 4, so we can come back and take a look at, see whether the applicant's version of this worked or did not work. That's my motion.
Do I hear a second? Hearing no second. Do we have a revised or alternative motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we deny the preliminary plot for 5 industrial lots to be known as Metcalf Soccer Complex and the 2 plat exception driveways for the reasons stipulated: 1, lighting; 2, location of the complex; 3, inappropriate street structure; and 4, proximity to Stillwell Park, as the rationale for why we're not approving this.
Dan Foyle, I second.
Any additional discussion?
Chairman,
Please.
just want to make sure that we're clear. The preliminary plat is not involve the lighting or the buildings. That's all the conditional use permit. Can you go to the slide with all the boxes on it? It's like the 3rd or 4th slide. Right there. That's basically what you're looking at with the preliminary plat is the lot layout.
Okay, I was going off the suggested motion. That's what in our document here.
Yeah, there's a preliminary plat and a conditional use permit. The plat is the lot layout. The conditional use permit is the use.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw that. Mr. Chairman, I move that we deny the conditional use permit for soccer complex to include 4 outdoor fields and 2 indoor fields in the subject stipulations recommended by staff. We deny this based on the lighting for the project, comma, the location of the project, comma, the street infrastructure, comma, and the proximity to Stillwell Park.
Dan Foil, second.
Any additional discussion? Question for staff. What's the value of the preliminary plat being approved if we're not approving the conditional use permit?
You can, this is Michelle Leiniger, you can approve the preliminary plat and not approve the CUP, but you can't do opposite. Because the CUP is dependent on the lot layout, the connections to Metcalf. So you can approve the preliminary plat, not the CUP.
Mr. Chairman, this is Sean Penley, planning staff. There would be 2 separate motions. You'd have to make a motion on both. The board can make the motion for or against either application, but it does probably make sense to address the CUP first. You can then do the preliminary plat and the exceptions as a separate motion and just provide reasons whether for or against, as either concur with staff's recommendations or come up with different reasons for why not to approve. Just be 2 separate motions.
Thank you. So the motion on the table is the conditional use is the denial of the conditional use permit, with Fred making a motion and Dan seconding it. Any additional discussion? Can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Dan Foil,
Yes.
Kelly Rast. Yes. Fred Wingert,
Yes.
Rod Richardson,
No.
Ken Klingensmith.
Yes. My stipulation, though, I just want to qualify, is based on lighting. Field lighting. So the motion is denied for the conditional use permit. Do we have a motion in reference to the preliminary plat from anyone?
Move to approve on the stipulations proposed by staff.
Can you talk in the microphone?
Move to approve the reasons specified by staff, including the stipulations associated therewith.
Do I hear a second? Any additional discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we deny the preliminary plat for 5 industrial lots to be known as Metcalf Soccer Complex and the 2 plat exceptions regarding the driveway for the reasons that we have discussed tonight.
Kelly Rast, second.
Any additional discussion? Could we do a roll call, please?
And just to be clear, this is for denying the preliminary plat. Okay, so Dan Foil,
Yes.
Kelly Rast. Yes. Fred Wingert,
Yes.
Rod Richardson,
No.
Ken Klingensmith.
No.
And that's 3-2. Denial motion carries.
And this will be presented forward to the Board of County Commissioners, December or January?
It will go before the Board of County Commissioners at their December 14th meeting, which is held here in this room at the County Administration Building located at 111 South Cherry Street. Meeting begins at 9:30 a.m.
Mr. Chairman, could the staff explain to the people attending if they wanted to come and speak, how that works at the county commission meeting?
Sean Penley, planning staff. The public is welcome to attend any Board of County Commissioners meeting. There will be a presentation by staff, just as we do here in the zoning board. The applicant will also have an opportunity to speak. If there are public in attendance, it's the chair's prerogative as to how they handle that. The public hearing is concluded tonight. It is a public meeting at the Board of County Commissioners meeting, and that'll be something that the board will hear from public if they're requested, if they're signing up to speak, they will have an opportunity to speak. But they have to speak on the item that as it comes up in the agenda. So at that meeting in December 7th, there will be another opportunity for the public to attend and participate.
December 14th.
December 14th, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Any other business before the board this evening? Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Moved.
Thank you.
Kelly Ross, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Morning. Thank you.
The time is 9.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming this evening.